Chapter 4100. That's good. The commander-in-chief exhaled softly and said to Qin Xiu, "He is carrying out a high-risk mission. The entrepreneur you are meeting with today is Cobra, who goes by the alias Crown. He has the secrets of several countries, including our country, and makes a living by selling secret. At the same time, he is also a drug dealer and the main person in charge of the underground dark market. This person is extremely cunning." Xia Jinyuan appeared by his side mainly to collect evidence of his crimes and to cut off the chain between him and the spies operating in China. "Qin Xiu, please continue to pretend that you don't know him, so as not to bring him danger." Qin Xiu's palms were full of sweat when he heard this. He didn't expect the famous Melbourne entrepreneur, Mr. Crown, to have so many underground identities. He curled his sweaty palms, and when he spoke again, his voice was even colder. "So, Xia Jinyuan is quite dangerous, right? Commander-in-Chief, I want to contact him unilaterally. Is that okay?" "No, this kind of mission is most suitable for a single soldier. He doesn't need anyone's help, and we can't send anyone to help him. He has been lurking for almost a year and a half. Our country has obtained countless evidence of Cobra's crimes. Now it's time to close the net, he can deal with it alone. Before he asks for help, we can only wait." After hanging up the phone, Qin Xiu didn't come back to his senses for a long time. He knew that Xia Jinyuan's identity was not simple. That year, when he and Yi Qian came back from the neighboring country, he saw Xia Jinyuan hugging Yi Qian with his own eyes. It was a secret that they went to the neighboring country, but Xia Jinyuan knew. From that moment on, he knew that Xia Jinyuan was not an ordinary soldier, nor was he just hanging around in the army and riding on the coattails of Commander-in-Chief Xia. Now that he knew that Xia Jinyuan, as the crown prince of the army, was carrying out such a high-risk mission, he was shocked and full of admiration. With family Xia's current status, why would he need to risk his life like this? There was no need at all. Even with family Xia's coattails, no one dared to say anything. But he didn't. In this way, he took root in the army. He didn't publicize it or keep a high profile. Even if the big and small circles in the capital misunderstood him, he never stood out to explain. Conscience. Clear conscience. Xia Jinyuan, you really have a clear conscience. No wonder, no wonder. Qin Xiu held his phone tightly and covered his forehead with his hand. He lowered his head and laughed softly. No wonder Yi Qian loves you so much. No wonder no one can come between you two. Today, he finally understood. Qin Xiu confessed to Yi Qian on the day the two of them returned from overseas to participate in a competition. He had almost humiliated himself. As Qin Xiu smiled, the corners of his eyes started to sparkle with tears. "Qin Xiu, oh Qin Xiu, you have to work hard." He had to work hard to forget the girl who moved his heart. In the car, Qin Xiu smiled bitterly, while Xia Jinyuan faced the angry Cobra with an indifferent expression. In Melbourne, Cobra had always been the one to give others a hard time and tell them to shut up. In the end, Qin Xiu made him suffer a big loss, and this loss came from him. Cobra's face was as ugly as his voice was furious. The person who received Cobra's fury was none other than the famous Western economist who believed that China had no reason to reject Cobra. "I've been humiliated, and you still have the face to continue teaching? I'm telling you now, I'll make sure you're done for. Damn you." After shouting, the furious Cobra ended the call by smashing his phone. Chapter 4101. Seeing the furious Cobra, Xia Jinyuan smiled coldly like snowflakes floating in the wind. If Cobra was already so angry, he would have to suffer in the future. Cobra, who smashed his phone into pieces, paced back and forth in the conference room angrily. Finally, he sat down again with a gloomy look. He leaned his head against the back of the chair and closed his eyes. His violently heaving chest gradually calmed down. He needed to enter the Chinese market, and the Chinese ambassador was his breakthrough to quickly enter the Chinese market. Therefore, he couldn't give up no matter what. In that case, he had to think of a way. He needed to think of a way to contact the Chinese ambassador again. Seeing this, Xia Jinyuan's fingers moved slightly. The coldness in his eyes gradually deepened as Cobra's confident smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Cobra wouldn't give up on entering the Chinese market because the forces behind him didn't want him to. Therefore, he had to think of a way. Qin Xiu rejected him today, but it didn't mean that he would give up on Qin Xiu. Based on his observation over the past year and a half, Cobra's conciliatory policy didn't work. Therefore, he would take a hard approach. It seemed like Cobra was resting with his eyes closed, but in fact, his fangs were full of venom. He was just waiting for the right time to bite his prey. And Qin Xiu was the prey that he had his eyes on. Xia Jinyuan lowered his eyes slightly. His unfathomable black eyes were so dark that there was almost no light. In the depths there was a slight surge of sharpness. It was the hostility under the calmness. He had to remind Qin Xiu. Although the ambassador was indeed very smart, Cobra was too cunning. It was impossible to guard against him. It was necessary to remind him. However, he didn't need to worry that Cobra would make a fatal move on Qin Xiu. The cunning snake knew how to protect himself. Since he needed to get close to Qin Xiu, he wouldn't do anything that would harm himself. He wouldn't make a fatal move, but he would definitely make a small move. He had to think of a way to remind Qin Xiu. It has to be done in a few days. After a few days, Cobra will have dealt with the famous economist who made him lose face and ruined his plan. Then he will come to Qin Xiu. Xia Jinyuan knew that Cobra would definitely deal with the famous Western economist who gave him a bad report, but he didn't expect him to act so quickly. The meeting with Qin Xiu in the morning failed, and in the afternoon, Cobra took revenge on the economist. The international news channel reported that at 14:00 p.m. on May 1st, the famous economist Jesse Morris was detained by the authorities for bribery. At 16:00 p.m., less than 2 hours before Jesse Morris was detained, one scandal after another about Jesse Morris, including a sex scandal, was reported one after another. The bribery did not cause much of a stir. When Jesse Morris was caught, he faced the camera and calmly said that it was a misunderstanding. Someone was trying to frame him. He was innocent and could accept any investigation. But after a few sets of photos of the sex scandal were exposed, Jesse Morris was like a small wooden boat sailing on the sea. When a big wave hit, the boat would be destroyed. Because this set of photos was related to underage girls, Jesse Morris had crossed the line and stepped into a minefield. In the morning, he could still calmly face the camera, but when he was exposed in the afternoon, he was like a defeated rooster, no longer able to hold his head high. Chapter 4102. Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting in the room, was watching TV. On the TV, Jesse Morris, who was about to be transferred to another prison, was hit in the head by a few tomatoes. Red juice burst out, and Jesse Morris was so embarrassed that he became a street rat that everyone wanted to beat up. All of this was manipulated by Cobra. He reported Jesse Morris for bribery and posted photos of Jesse Morris playing with underage girls. It only took 2 hours to drag Jesse Morris from heaven to hell. Cobra didn't just have the evidence of Jesse Morris's downfall. He also had a lot of such photos. These photos became Cobra's secret weapon to get a hold of a certain country's secret. The reason why Russia sent Luke to infiltrate Cobra was because there was a problem with the Russian higher-up. However, Russia did not find out which higher-ups were the problem, so Luke infiltrated. Luke was about to return to Russia. Presumably, Russia already knew which higher-ups were the problem. Xia Jinyuan turned off the TV and did not pay attention to what would happen to the economist, Jesse Morris. Prey targeted by Cobra never had a good ending. He now only hoped that Luke would act quickly. The sooner the better, the sooner he could return to China and reunite with his lover. He did not know what his little fox was doing at home. It was now 16 p.m. in Melbourne, 14 hours later than in China. That meant that it was already 5 a.m. on May 2nd in China. May 1st. Labor Day was here. There was no need to think about the military academy having a holiday. They might be training somewhere. Back then, their holidays were all fake. The college students in the university town were looking forward to May 1st, National Day, winter and summer holidays. They were different. Instead, they were looking forward to school reopening. What kind of holiday was that? In addition to training, it was training. They could not enjoy the joy of holidays at all. It was better to go to school. At least there was a weekend. Sometimes, there was no time to train during the holidays. When the students protested, the instructor would play dumb. He patted his head and said with a look of realization, "Io, look at my memory. I forgot that today is Sunday. Sorry. He looked like he was treating the students as fools. Then, the students who were holding back their anger said, "Since we know, is it a holiday?" So what would the instructor say? The instructors, who were full of tricks, would say earnestly, "We are all soldiers. How can soldiers give up halfway? If you give up half of today's training so easily, then tomorrow, you might easily give up an inch of your country's land." Students, the most important thing is perseverance and perseverance. We can't give up so easily, understand? What else could he say? With such a huge accusation, would they still dare to say that they had half a day off on the weekend? He didn't dare. All of them continued their training during the holidays. Xia Jinyuan thought about his past in the military academy and how his lover had gone through all the things he had gone through. For some reason, he felt as if his chest was filled with honey, so much so that even the faint smile on his lips was as sweet as honey. Personally bringing the person he loved to walk down the path he had once walked, that kind of feeling was really just thinking about it for a moment. The tip of his tongue dripped with honey. Just wait a little longer, little fox. I'll be back for you soon. Very soon. Chapter 4103. The person Lieutenant Colonel Xia missed so dearly was currently hugging a pillow in her sleep. No one knew what she was dreaming of, but her lips that had been moistened by dew until they were tender like flower petals were overflowing with a sweet smile, and her picturesque brows were also smiling. He Jing looked at Yi Qian, who had woken up later than her. She reached out to wake Yi Qian up, but she slowly retracted her hand. She was smiling so sweetly even in her dreams that He Jing couldn't bear to see her like this. She didn't know what she was dreaming about, but she was so sweet, like honey. There were only a few mouthfuls of rations for field training. The other students were all worried about how they were going to survive for 3 days and 2 nights. She, on the other hand, was smiling sweetly even in her dreams. Those with strong mental fortitude would be able to tell at this point. He Jing was a little envious. In Yi Qian's dream, Xia Jinyuan was wearing a well-ironed military uniform. He was so handsome that he looked like he had walked out of a painting. Every stroke of his was incomparably elegant. He walked towards her step by step under the sunlight. Every few steps, he would call her little fox in his clear voice, sweet and full of affection. Yi Jian looked at the man who was getting closer and closer to her. She listened to his affectionate voice until she saw his dark eyes that were as vast as the stars looking at her with a smile. Yi Jian, who had just woken up, smiled and smiled. She smiled until her teeth were as beautiful as the shell. In fact, that was indeed the case. He Jing looked at Yi Qian, who was smiling like this even in his dreams, and was dumbfounded. What kind of sweet dream was he having? He was about to laugh out loud. Damn! Quick, help me take a picture. Help me take a picture. Not far away, the male student's anxious voice could be heard. He Jing turned her head to look. Yi Qian, who was having a sweet dream, suddenly opened his eyes and quickly got up. What happened? He had just woken up, so his voice was still a little hoarse. He Jing turned her head again and looked at Yi Qian, who had woken up in an instant. She blinked and suddenly couldn't tell if Yi Qian was awake or asleep. The slightest rustling of leaves in the wind woke him up? A nest of ants crawled on him and scared him. The student in front replied to Yi Qian with a laugh. When he woke up and realized that there were ants all over his arms, he was indeed a little scared. Yi Qian, who had just woken up from his sweet dream, heard that it was just a nest of ants and did not ask any more questions. It was very common to see snakes, insects, ants, and rats in the jungle at night. But Yi Jian, who had her back turned, sighed silently. She put her hand to her lips, and a sweet smile crept up the corner of her mouth again. Just now, she had a beautiful dream about Captain Xia. In the dream, her Captain Xia came back, and then he was about to kiss her. But, I was so close to kissing her, and in the end she woke up. What a pity! He sighed again. What a pity! He almost kissed her. I reflexively raised my wrist, and when I saw the time with a slightly disappointed expression, the sweetness brought about by my dream was instantly retracted into the depths of my heart. It was already 5 in the morning. Everyone had 10 minutes to regroup and set off immediately after 10 minutes. The students who had been resting by the stream at night had already woken up. They carried their rifles and began to regroup. Yi Qian, who was squatting by the mossy rock, opened his water bottle and brought it to the clear stream. When he heard the sound of the empty water bottle gradually become solid, Yi Qian picked up the water bottle and said to He Jing behind him, "Come, give me the water bottle. Fill it up and we'll set off." Chapter 4104. As He Jing handed the kettle over, she was still thinking about the sweet smile Yi Qian had shown in her dream. Having been classmates for 3 years, He Jing had never seen Yi Qian smile so sweetly before. She couldn't resist her curiosity. Half squatting, she bent her knees and moved to Yi Qian's side. She nudged Yi Qian lightly with her shoulder and asked softly with a smile, "What kind of sweet dream did you have just now? You were smiling so much that even your teeth were showing. It was as if you had drunk honey. Even I felt that it was sweet just looking at you." The stream water flowed into the kettle, and it didn't take long for the entire kettle to be filled. Yi Qian picked up the wet kettle and screwed the lid back on. She turned her head to look at He Jing. Her fair cheeks had a touch of pink that was as light as the tips of lotus petals. "You're smiling? You made a sound?" No way. She wasn't at the stage where she would laugh out loud even in her dreams. She thought about the sweetness of reuniting after a long separation in her dream. She thought about how the man she loved held her face gently with both hands and gazed deeply at her with his dark eyes full of affection. She thought about how he slowly lowered his head and moved closer to her. As she thought about it, Yi Qian felt her cheeks heat up. He Jing looked at Yi Qian, who was like a peach blossom standing on a branch in the spring breeze. She looked like she was about to bloom but was also shy. She suddenly realized what was going on. With a teasing expression, she said, oh no, spring is long over. Why are you still thinking about spring now? Did you have a wet dream?" Thinking about spring? Wet dream? Yi Qian was so embarrassed that her face felt like it was steaming. "What nonsense are you talking about? There's no such thing. He didn't even kiss her. How could it be called a wet dream? Besides, wasn't a wet dream supposed to be that? Even if he did kiss her and didn't do anything else, it wouldn't be a wet dream. There's no such thing? There's clearly something going on. Look at your face. It's all wet with spring. Look at your smile. You look like a young girl who is thinking about spring." He Jing had been in a relationship before. As an experienced person, she knew that Yi Qian must be dreaming of her mysterious boyfriend. Her smile was full of ridicule. Yi Qian was so embarrassed that the light pink on her cheeks became thicker. The color was rich and beautiful, and He Jing was stunned for a moment. Amidst the green mountains and clear waters, the beauty was like a flower blooming in the wind. It was picturesque, beautiful to the point that it was alluring. Every frown and smile of hers was devastatingly beautiful. He Jing couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She even had the urge to touch Yi Qian's face. And that was exactly what she did. Yi Qian looked at his comrade and reached out to touch his face. He blinked and asked Yi Jing, "What's wrong?" "There's something on my face. Your face is stained with the words national beauty. I feel like I've profited greatly just by touching it. This feeling, it's too good. It's really like a peeled egg. It's tender and smooth." He Jing sighed as she touched his face. "Little Jane Eyre, your boyfriend really profited greatly. This skin, this color. Baby." He Jing had always been steady and rarely said such joking words. Yi Jian, who was suddenly taken advantage of by He Jing, hurriedly picked up He Jing's hand that was still touching her face and glared at her. "There are a lot of peeled eggs in the cafeteria. I'll peel 8 or 10 eggs for you later, and let you touch as much as you want." "No, no, no. Touching eggs doesn't even feel like touching you." He Jing knew when to stop. Seeing Yi Jian blushing, although she still wanted to tease her, she knew that if she continued teasing her, she would definitely attract Su Wen, the person who wanted to stir up trouble, over. Chapter 4105. She cleared her throat and straightened her face. She suppressed her voice and smiled with an "I know everything" expression. "What's there to be shy about? It's normal to have wet dreams. You haven't heard from your husband for a long time, right? How can you not miss him after not seeing him for so long?" I understand. After putting her water bottle on her back, He Jing stood up and patted Yi Qian's shoulder. "Wash your face. Wenzi is smarter than me. She'll definitely notice something if you do this. I'll go down to wash my face. It's better to keep the water here so it won't be contaminated by the dead skin on my face." He Jing left with a smile, leaving Yi Qian alone in a daze. Then, Yi Qian lowered her head and saw her reflection in the gurgling water of the mountain stream. The stream was very clear. The water in the 2-palm-sized stream swayed slightly. Although her reflection was distorted, she could still clearly see that the corners of her mouth were curved. Just as He Jing said, the corners of her mouth were really melted with honey. Yi Qian looked at her reflection in the stream and couldn't help but purse her lips and smile deeply. It wasn't a wet dream. It was a beautiful and deeply missed dream. The feeling in the dream was too sweet, too soft, and too beautiful. It was as if it was real. This was a good dream. Maybe. She put her hands into the stream. The ripples disturbed the spring water and blurred her reflection. The only thing that didn't change was the sweet smile on her face. Maybe her Captain Xia would be back soon. Because he told her to wait for him, and that he would be back soon. A gentleman's promise must be true. She scooped up the cool water of the mountain stream to wash her face. The coolness of the water suppressed the embarrassment on her face bit by bit and also melted the honeyed smile on her face and brows. Su Wen didn't see the smile on Yi Qian's face, but she saw He Jing and Yi Qian talking for a few minutes. It was normal to talk for a few minutes. What wasn't normal was the smile on He Jing's face. She rolled her dark eyes and leaned over to ask He Jing with a smile, "What were you two talking about just now? The smile on your face is very strange. Were you making fun of our captain? Did you catch our captain doing something embarrassing? Can you share it with me?" Although Su Wen was unreliable at times, she was terrifying when she was meticulous. She was like a detective, able to catch even the slightest clue. He Jing, who had deliberately restrained the smile on her face, muttered in her heart, "This is bad." She pretended that nothing had happened and glanced at her, saying indifferently, "I have nothing to share." She even deliberately pointed at Su Wen's eyes and said disdainfully, "There's still some eye wax. Hurry up and wash it. Something's not right, something's not right. Just now you must have said something unspeakable. Good, you're hiding it from me, right? Ha ha, Su Xian's name isn't for nothing. Just you wait, my big sister He Jing. Su-wen rubbed her eyes to wipe away the non-existent mucus. Seeing her smiling face, He-jing raised her hand and flicked her on the forehead. You still want to scout, Su-wen? Go to where it's cool. I've washed my face. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Song Jiqiu, who had put away the moisture-proof mat, happened to see this scene. She raised her voice and said to He-jing, He-jing, students, unite and love each other. Well, I've protected her. He-jing glanced at Song Jiqiu with a smile and thought, little girl, Wenzi has a man she likes. You're too late. Su-wen glanced at Song Jiqiu and squinted her eyes slightly. She seemed to understand something and said with a faint smile, Student Song Jiqiu, don't meddle too much. Chapter 4106. I don't care about you. I'll ask He-jing to put away the moisture-proof pads as soon as possible. Unity and friendship, Song Jiqiu answered with a faint smile, which instantly dissolved the somewhat strange atmosphere. Down below, a male student picked up a small stone and threw it at his comrade who was washing his face. He laughed and scolded, Can you be a little more shameless? We're all down there collecting water, and you're washing your face up there alone? Manners, manners. Ha ha ha, do you think there's only my dead skin in the water? Maybe there's also the urine and feces of the beasts in the mountain? Ha ha ha. Damn it, you're disgusting. The urine and feces of the beasts are cleaner than the dead skin on your face. I'm already merciful by not washing my feet. How could you complain about it? If I had known, I would have washed my feet. Just say it if you want to be beaten. My fists are waiting for you. Thinking of the water she had just fetched, Su-wen glanced at the ground, dug out a small stone from a large patch of moss, and threw it at the leg of the male student who was washing his face. Lu Yang, I dare you to say that again. Lu Yang, who was being criticized by others, laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, I won't say it again, I won't say it again. I'm going to throw up myself. Yi Qian, who was upstream, wiped his hands silently and destroyed the evidence. Sorry, she washed her face up there alone just now. The 10-minute reorganization was very relaxing. After 10 minutes, all the students gathered in line under Yi Qian's stern command. The young faces, which were full of the aura of the rising sun, showed unyielding determination. They looked forward with fearless eyes. The jungle camouflage on their bodies seemed to be integrated with the surrounding mountains, protecting this vibrant land with the grass and trees here. As the captain, Yi Qian stood in the front with a solemn expression. After counting off, he glanced at the faces of all his comrades and gave the command in a cold voice. Let's go. At 5:11 in the morning, the 15 students in Group 3 started a new day of field training. In the vast forest, they followed the designated route. They walked hand in hand across the rivers in the mountains, climbed over the moss-covered rocks, and climbed up the steep hills towards the designated destination. From here to here, there is a very steep, hanging mountain. If you don't go this way, you have to go around it. At 2 p.m., Yi Qian, who had been marching for more than half a day, and all the students of Group 3 were discussing how to proceed. The routes in the forest were extremely complicated. Even with a compass, one could get lost if they were not careful. Not to mention, there were also legends of barbarians and all kinds of creepy and mysterious legends. However, they did not enter the depths of the forest, nor did they enter the depths of the forest that no one had entered before. They had always been active in the forest areas where villagers would go into the mountains to purchase goods. If we take a detour from here, I'm afraid it will be dark by the time we reach the village. It's easier to get lost in the dark. My suggestion is to place the escape rope from the top of the suspended slope of the mountain. Everyone will slide down the escape rope. What do you think? If we take a detour, although the route will be a little longer, it will be safer. No, the detour is far away, and it will also lengthen the time. Just now, Yi Qian said that if we don't enter the village when it's dark, the risk of getting lost will increase. This is a forest area, and there are many places that even the local villagers don't dare to enter. If we get lost, even a compass won't be able to guide us. If we get lost alone, we might not even be able to come out alive. Chapter 4107. Song Jiqiu did not agree with what the previous student had said. It seemed safe to take a detour, but in fact it was more unpredictable. But this is an overhanging slope, which is almost 3 stories high. If we are not careful and fall down, we will at least suffer a fracture. I think what Song Jiqiu said is reasonable. The unpredictable risk is too great after dark. If we go down the overhanging slope, we at least know the dangers that we may encounter. I choose the shortcut and go down the overhanging slope. The overhanging slope meant that the mountain was cut off from the mountain route. The top was solid, but the bottom was empty. They could not walk on it, and they had to put down a rope to pass it. Suwon looked at the mountain village where they would sleep tonight and said in a low voice, "Before we set off, a senior brother in the senior year told me that if we did not reach the village, we should stop here." She pointed at a place on the electronic map. Her face was a little pale, and her voice was even lower. "This is the place where the ancestors of the villagers rest in peace. It is said that there will be will-o'-the-wisp. I choose the overhanging slope." She was most afraid of sleeping in a graveyard. She would rather choose a shortcut that seemed dangerous, but in fact, she only needed to pay attention to it. Suwen's words made the male students' faces change slightly. Although they were soldiers and believed in materialism, they could not get over the hurdle in their hearts. Song Jiqiu looked at Yi Qian. The final decision was up to Yi Qian. Moreover, she believed that with Yi Qian's commanding ability, she must have already known the answer in her heart. "If we choose the shortcut, Vice Captain Song Jiqiu and I will go down first, and then you guys go down. This road has been taken by our senior brothers and sisters before. We are just going to walk it again. It won't be a big problem if we are careful. Moreover, this is a test to see if we are qualified in our usual training. It is not a wise choice to take the long way just to avoid the hanging rope." Yi Qian slowed down her speech and said word by word. Her cold voice, which was neither high nor low, was very penetrating. She expressed her opinion and let the students know which choice was the wisest. Her words made several students, who paid attention to safety but missed the key points, nod involuntarily. That was indeed the case. He had to choose between the two. He couldn't pick up a sesame seed and drop a watermelon. After half an hour of rest, the 15 students shook off the ants that had burrowed into their bodies at some point in time. They applied a few lumps of cooling ointment on their rashes and poured out the fine dust and pebbles from their boot. Leaning against each other, they recuperated and set off again. They had to get to the village where they were staying for the night before dark, so they had to hurry. When it came to the most dangerous slope of the day, a few male students found 2 cedar trees and tied the escape rope tightly. Then, they held the rope tightly with both hands and kicked the cedar trees to ensure that it was tied tightly. It was 3 stories high in the air. 1 escape rope was not enough to reach the bottom, so 3 escape ropes were used to tie it together. "Okay, throw the escape rope down. Fasten the descender." Done. Song Jiqiu and Yi Qian fastened the descender to the escape rope, tightened their backpacks, and placed their rifles horizontally on the backpack. The 2 of them gave their comrades a thumbs up, indicating that everything was over. Prepare to descend. Several male students were still tightening the rope tied to the cedar trees. Everyone stared at the 2 people who were beginning to descend, and they all held their breaths. This was their first wilderness survival training, so they had to rely on themselves. If there was an accident, they had to solve it by themselves. In the wilderness, where there were few people, no one wanted to have an accident. Chapter 4108. This kind of survival training was not difficult for Yi Qian, but it was the simplest primary training. After trying to tighten the escape rope, she began to speed up her descent. She pulled the escape rope and took a breath. After another breath, Yi Qian had already begun to descend. At this moment, his feet could still push against the mountain. When the escape rope descended vertically along the suspended layer, his feet lost the power to push against the mountain. He could only rely on the strength of his upper limbs and the skills that he had trained in daily life to complete the suspended landing. At first, Yi Qian's speed was neither fast nor slow, parallel to that of Song Jiqiu, who was descending together with him. When he was about to reach the suspended layer, Song Jiqiu just moved the descender. When she raised her head again, Yi Qian, who had been descending together with her just now, had descended more than 1 meter in an instant and disappeared in front of her eyes. She heard the sound of the students gasping slightly. She lowered her head and looked down. Yi Qian had already descended to the suspended layer and was descending at a very fast speed. For her, pulling the rope, tightening the rope, and sliding the descender were as simple as eating and drinking. All the movements were completed in a coherent manner without any pause in between. She was so skillful, as if she had done this kind of descending training thousands of times. Song Jiqiu could not help but raise her eyebrows. She said to the students in the class who could no longer see Yi Qian, descending 3 meters in 10 seconds. "I'm still up there now. She has already landed." In other words, Yi Qian landed in less than a minute after descending the 3-story escape rope. The students who were still standing up there silently wiped the sweat on their foreheads that had not been dried by the mountain wind. Yi Qian in their class was destined to be a legend that could not be surpassed. After landing with both feet, Yi Qian untied the descender, grabbed the escape rope with both hands and shook it hard. She looked up at the top of the mountain where the light and darkness were separated. She raised her head and shouted, landing safely. "Next. Hurry up." She landed safely, which meant that everything was fine down there. All the students could start to descend. Female students had priority. Suwon was the first to descend after Yi Qian. She had improved very quickly in the past 2 years, and her basic skills had been trained very well by Yi Qian. Even so, this was her first time descending a 3-story building in the wilderness, so she was still a little nervous. She took a deep breath and gave an OK sign to the male student who was pulling the rope tightly. Then, she began to descend rhythmically. "Good luck." He Jing, who was the second to get ready, encouraged her good friend and comrade in a low voice. "Yes, it's fine. It'll work," Suwon replied. She pushed her feet down and leaned back slightly. As the descender slid, Suwon began to descend. Below them, Song Jiqiu landed safely. She stepped on the escape rope with 1 foot and held it tightly with both hands. She smiled at Yi Qian, who had done the same to ensure that the escape rope would not sway. "You are so awesome. Do you really plan to enter the front line in the future? Last time, the instructor said that with your current physical fitness results, it wouldn't be a problem for you to directly participate in the Special Forces selection. The biggest problem is that our country doesn't have an official female Special Forces unit yet." After seeing Yi Qian's results, the instructors in charge of physical fitness training in the military school all agreed that he could participate in the selection of the Special Forces. The only pity was that there was no female Special Forces unit yet. Yi Qian, who had been staring at the top and looking against the light, said with a smile, "If there is no female Special Forces unit, I can join the male Special Forces unit. As long as it's a unit, it's fine. It doesn't matter whether it's male or female." "Hey, do you really have such a plan? Do you want to join the Special Forces after graduating from the military school? Do you want to join the field forces?" Song Jiqiu read the seriousness in Yi Qian's smile and was shocked by herself. Chapter 4109. In the backlight, Yi Qian saw Suwon descending steadily. She turned around and said to her shocked comrade, "Is it strange? I don't think so. It's normal. I really like going to the frontline field forces. It's so exciting. There's still 1 year left before graduation. It's time to plan my future." After the shock, Song Jiqiu thought it was quite suitable for Yi Qian to join the Special Forces. It seems that you really plan to join the field forces. It's very hard for a female soldier to join the field forces. He admired her courage very much. To be honest, he was scared to join the field forces or the special forces as a male soldier. It was so hard that he couldn't even quit. Without courage, he couldn't even try some things. Yi Qian, you're the comrade I admire the most. I don't think I'll meet such a strong comrade like you when I join the special forces. Song Jiqiu said seriously, you've always been number one among your classmates for 3 years. Now you say you'll join the special forces after graduation. I believe you. Yi Qian chuckled. He had guessed it right. After graduation, it was possible for her to join the Snowfield Brigade directly and become a member of the Snowfield Special Forces Brigade. We'll talk about it when the time comes. I have an idea, but I need a place to accept it. They're descending. Tighten the rope. Yi Qian looked up after he finished speaking. This topic could be ended. Song Jiqiu knew what he meant. She tightened the rope in her hand. The male student on the rope had begun to descend in the air. His speed was a little faster than Su Wen's. Su Wen was very fast. Yi Qian could feel that the rope didn't shake out of control. It could be seen that Su Wen had a good grasp of the rhythm. The male student landed safely. Su Wen finished descending 1 minute later than him. Su Wen's time on the 3-story suspended floor, which was about 10 meters high, was within the acceptable range. After descending, she took off the descender and high-fived Yi Qian. She said in high spirits, "How was it? Did I get any praise?" "Not bad. Your control is very stable. Qualified." Yi Qian praised her generously. She had seen Su Wen's improvement with her own eyes. She had gone from not having any basic skills to being able to complete every physical fitness test. All of this was due to her own hard work and perseverance. Su Wen, who was wiping the sweat from her forehead, smiled so brightly that her eyes seemed to be filled with water. She patted her cheeks, which had turned red because of nervousness, and replied with a smile, "I also feel good about myself. Come on, let me step on the rope. You rest." "All right, I'll leave it to you." Yi Qian did not refuse. They had always worked together like this, so there was no need to refuse. While training to improve one's ability, it also greatly improved the rapport between comrades. Wilderness survival training was even more so. However, in Yi Qian's eyes, this was not wilderness survival training. It could only be considered wilderness survival training, and it had nothing to do with training. True wilderness survival training was like the training of the Snowfield Brigade. They had to bring a day's worth of food and survive in the wilderness for 7 days. They had to break out of an encirclement, counter-break out of an encirclement, scout the enemy, climb cliffs, and so on. This was true wilderness survival training. It was not like now, where they only had to walk steeply and occasionally deal with dangerous situations. She handled it with ease and without any pressure. However, for the students who were experiencing wilderness survival for the first time, it was much more difficult. It was already 4:30 in the afternoon. The sky got dark early in the mountains. There was still light outside, but the forest was beginning to dim. There were still students who had not finished descending, so they had to hurry. Chapter 41:10. There were 3 other students. The 3 of them tied the 2 escape ropes back into one and tied it around the fir tree. They formed an N shape and threw the 2 ends of the escape rope downwards. This way, the last student could put away the moving escape rope after he completed his descent. "All right, I'm going to descend. You 2 get ready." A male student grabbed one end of the escape rope and shouted down, "I'm going to start. You guys tighten the rope down there. Tighten it. I guarantee you won't fall. Everyone will pull you. Don't be a coward. Come down." Su Wen raised her eyebrows at Yi Qian and said proudly, "Am I braver than the other male students now? Ayaya, I'm starting to admire myself more and more." "Forget it. You're being cocky again. How dare you? Do you want to sleep in that place tonight?" He Jing loved to knock down Su Wen's cocky tail so that she wouldn't get carried away and start regressing again. Yi Qian didn't comment much on this. Occasionally, He Jing did need to step on Su Wen's cocky tail. The students who had landed safely below were laughing unrestrainedly. The sunlight that belonged only to them made the 3 students above laugh uncontrollably. The male student wasn't afraid, but he was careless when he was descending. The cushion wasn't fully buckled when he went down. In an instant, his entire body slid down the escape rope in a daze. Su Lin. F***CK. Quick, tighten the rope. Seeing this scene, all the male students' eyes widened and they roared. Something big was going to happen. Yi Jian, who had been standing at the side and staring at him, narrowed her eyes. With quick reflexes, she pulled on the rope tightly and swung it with all her might. The rope wrapped around the male student like a snake. The students who had witnessed the entire process felt their hearts in their throat. Their eyes were filled with shock. While they were still in shock, they saw the escape rope suddenly come to life and wrap tightly around Su Lin. Their falling comrade suddenly stopped in midair. At that moment, all the students felt as if they had just escaped a calamity. Yi Qian grabbed the escape rope with both hands, pulled it tight, and ran towards the same level of the mountain. She pulled the originally vertical escape rope into a slope. As soon as she tightened the rope, the male students immediately reacted. Lu Yang and a few other male students rushed forward to help Yi Qian tighten the rope. Song Jiqiu yelled, "Su Lin, lock the buffer tightly." He roared so hard that the veins on his neck popped out. Damn it! Right now, he was hanging from a height of 5 to 6 meters. If he were to fall, even if he didn't die, he would at least have a few broken bones. Now it was all bumpy rocks. In a moment of carelessness, the male student, Su Lin, scared himself half to death. His whole body broke out in cold sweat. He never thought that he would make such a mistake. Fortunately, he was calm enough and did not lose his sense of propriety. He hurriedly buckled the buffer in his hand onto the escape rope. He was a little nervous when he buckled it, and his hands were trembling. Damn it, it's too tight. I can't buckle it in. Su Lin, who was entangled by the escape rope, buckled it twice, but still failed to buckle the buffer tightly into his camouflage uniform. Yi Qian said to the male students who were tightening the escape rope with her, "You guys tighten the rope. Don't shake it. I'm going to help him now." "Okay, don't worry about us." All the male students tightened their arm muscles. They had to tighten the rope. If they did not tighten it, once the escape rope loosened, Su Lin, who was hanging from a height of 5 to 6 meters, would fall down. Yi Qian nodded slightly. She loosened her hand and rushed to the other end of the escape rope that the male students were holding. Chapter 41:11. Yi Qian said to the male students, "Grab the escape rope and go in one direction. Try to close the rope. I'll climb up and fasten it for Su Lin." "I'll go up," Song Jiqiu said in a low voice. "No, you're a man. You're heavier than me." Yi Qian replied and signaled to the male students to fasten the escape rope on their end to the one on Su Lin's end. Su Wen was so nervous that she held He Jing's wrist tightly with one hand. Her teeth were trembling. "Don't get carried away. Don't fall down. Don't fall down. It's good that you know." "Shut up. Our captain is going up to save him." He Jing didn't even feel the pain of Su Wen's grip on her wrist. She was so nervous that she didn't even feel pain. The students on the other end of the escape rope moved closer to where Lu Yang and the other male students were. Su Lin, who was sweating profusely, tried countless times, but he still couldn't get the cushion into the rope that was so tight that it felt like it was going to break his body into several pieces. Yi Qian, who was below, said to him calmly, "Su Lin, relax. I'm coming over now. Don't worry. It's okay. The tighter the rope, the safer it is." It was true. The tighter the rope, the less likely Su Lin would fall down. At least, they didn't have to worry about Su Lin falling down. At least Su Lin was safe now. "Hold on tight. Don't let go. The students who were holding on to the escape rope reminded each other. The two male students who hadn't come down yet knew that something had happened to Su Lin. The slope was too steep for them to see where Su Lin was hanging. They didn't ask much, but waited for their classmates below to save Su Lin with their backs tense. Yi Jian stepped on the shoulders of two male students who were squatting down. She then pulled the escape rope tightly with both hands. Her body was hooked upwards and her legs were twisted upwards. She twisted the escape rope around her calves. The students who looked up saw Yi Jian as agile as a monkey. Her legs didn't need any help at all as she climbed up quickly. "Awesome, Captain." A stupefied student couldn't help but voice out his thoughts. He was the only one who said it, because he had said what all the other students were thinking. He was really awesome. Pull tight, pull tight. Move closer to Su Lin, slowly. As Yi Qian continued to climb up, he got closer and closer to Su Lin. The students below once again felt their hearts in their throat. When Su Lin saw Yi Qian, he broke out in a cold sweat. The moment he saw Yi Qian, he felt as if his back was leaning against an immovable mountain, making him feel safe. Yi Qian's right calf was wrapped around the escape rope. His right hand gripped the escape rope tightly, and his left hand reached out to Su Lin. "Give me the cushioning device in your hand. Don't strain your body too much. It'll strain your muscles." Okay, be careful." Su Lin handed Yi Qian the shock absorber that she had held so tightly that her fingers were trembling slightly because she had used too much strength. Yi Qian was very calm. He used his strength to buckle the shock absorber onto the escape rope that was wrapped around Su Lin's body. With a click, Yi Qian lightly exhaled. "Okay, Su Lin, I'll let them release you." The students below saw Yi Qian's hand gesture and slowly released the escape rope that was wrapped around Su Lin. Only then did everyone let out a sigh of relief. Yi Jing gently closed her eyes before slowly opening them. Just now, if it wasn't for Yi Qian, Su Lin would already be lying on the ground. It's okay. Su Wen panted as she spoke. Her legs were so tight that they were numb. Chapter 41:12. All the trainees felt relieved. It was really dangerous just now. If their captain, Yi Qian, had not reacted in time and knew how to save him, Su Lin would have been either dead or disabled. Su Lin, who was still on the top, gasped for breath. His chest heaved up and down. It was obvious that he was scared. As Yi Qian said, "It's okay, Su Lin." His qi and blood gradually recovered, and the fear on his face faded a lot. The wind in the mountain was getting colder and colder. Su Lin could not help but shiver. He swallowed hard. After being nervous, his voice was a little hoarse. "Thank you, Captain. Thanks for your help just now. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died." They did not wear helmets. They were all wearing training caps. Once their heads hit the ground, they would die. Yi Qian saw that he was so scared that he could not even say, "Thank you." After thinking for a while, she reached out and patted him on the shoulder. "Don't be scared. It's normal to have accidents during training. Learning from it and gaining experience is also progress. Next time, you should know that you can't let your guard down at any time. Even if it's a sure thing, there will still be what if. Go down and take a breather. 2 of our comrades have to come down." Su Lin nodded. His arm muscles were still twitching. He took a few deep breaths in a row. After feeling a little calmer, he wiped the sweat that almost reached his eyes and started to descend slowly. Yi Qian said to the 2 comrades on the top, "Hong Wenlin, Zhu Xian, you 2 come down. Be careful. It's okay down there." Hearing that, the 2 male trainees, who were waiting on the top, felt relieved. They hurriedly replied to Yi Qian, "Got it. Got it." After receiving their replies, Yi Qian started to descend. She did not descend to the bottom in one breath like before. Su Lin was scared, so his speed was quite slow. However, she was just a little bit below Su Lin. In case there were any accidents, she could immediately reach out and grab him. Song Jiqiu wiped her red eyes, which were stung by the sweat. She did not care about the discomfort in her eyes. She stared at Su Lin without blinking for fear of any accident. When Su Lin came down, his hands were still trembling. Even the buffer was removed by Song Jiqiu, the vice-captain. It's okay. It's okay. Take a breath. Take a breath. Song Jiqiu, who was removing the buffer for him, could feel that the muscles all over Su Lin's body were still tense. His arms, in particular, were as hard as rock. This guy was scared out of his wits just now. While Su Lin was still speaking, his shoulder had already been punched by countless fists. What are you thinking up there? You didn't even buckle your belt properly before rushing down. If it weren't for our captain, you would be lying on the ground by now. We were so shocked by you that we couldn't catch our breath. Did you feel like you were about to die? Go and thank our captain. Song Jiqiu and Yi Qian, who had come down earlier, looked at each other. Song Jiqiu said to several comrades who were surrounding Su Lin with concern, "Help Su Lin to the side to rest. Let the two above come down." Su Lin, whose knees were tensed, did not let his comrades help him up. It was too embarrassing. He waved his hand and supported himself with his hands on his knees. He gritted his teeth and stood up. Breathing heavily, he took a few steps forward and stood in front of Yi Qian, saluting him. "Captain, thank you. If it were not for their captain, he would not have been so lucky as to stand up and speak." Seeing this, Yi Qian raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "You don't have to thank me. You will definitely be punished when you go back. You can thank me after the punishment." Such a serious mistake. After the rescue was successful, it was time to settle the score after autumn. Chapter 41:13. Su Lin didn't think the punishment was horrible. He put down his arms seriously and said, "I should be punished. I accept all the punishments." "Okay. Go and have a rest." Yi Qian nodded slightly and said to his comrades standing behind him, "Give him a hand. Massage his legs and arms. They look stiff." Wasn't it stiff? When they were pressed, they were as hard as stones without any elasticity. None of the students thought that Su Lin would be punished when he went back. The punishment was not for the sake of punishment. It was just to remind Su Lin of this mistake so that he wouldn't make the same mistake again. The two students above started to descend. Because of Su Lin's accident, Song Jiqiu watched them buckle the bumper and reminded them from time to time, "Buckle the bumper. Don't worry." Because of the previous accident, they were all nervous when they saw their comrades coming down. They were afraid that something would go wrong again. Yi Qian looked up at the sky. It was still bright, but the mountain wind was not as cold as before. The wind stopped and the trees were quiet. They were the only ones in the quiet mountain. The weather forecast said that there would be light rain in the forest area on May 2nd. It seemed that it was going to rain. The last two students came down safe and sound. The students who had been watching Su Lin closely breathed a sigh of relief in unison. Some students told them about Su Lin's accident just now. Hong Wenlin and Zhu Xian, who didn't know what had happened, were also shocked. The other students untied the escape ropes and put them away. Hong Wenlin and Zhu Xian ran to Su Lin, who was stretching his muscles and bones, to ask about the situation. After knowing that everything was safe, they felt relieved. Thanks to Captain Yi Qian, the consequences would be unimaginable. The escape ropes were untied and put away one by one. The 15 students took 2 minutes to adjust themselves and rushed to the village where they would stay tonight. The 10-meter drop required the upper limbs to exert strength. Plus, they were nervous. The arms of the students walking at the front were so sore that it was difficult for them to raise their arms. In the end, they helped each other and raced against time to reach the village before dark. The village was not big. If it were not for the high-tension iron frame on the mountain, the students would think that the villagers at the foot of the mountain lived a life isolated from the outside world. It was already 5:30 in the evening. Standing on top of the mountain, there was still daylight, but once they entered the forest, the sky was already dark, and their figures were blurred. 5 people in a group, buckle on the escape rope, one group at a time, don't be too far apart. The vice captain, Song Jichio, began to organize the students to descend the mountain. In order to prevent the students from being left alone, she took out the escape rope and tied it to the backpacks of the 2 students in the front and back. The 3 students in the middle were fastened tightly with cushions. In this way, the 5 of them were like grasshoppers tied to a rope. They followed each other and began to descend the mountain. This was the teamwork that one would definitely encounter in wilderness survival training. If one was fast, one would be fast. If one was slow, one would be slow. If a student fell, they would be able to react quickly and stabilize themselves. At the same time, they would also stabilize the student who fell. Tacit understanding wasn't something that could be developed in a day or 2. It was something that could only be developed through years of training together, working together, going through hardships together, and going through joys and sorrows together. When they reached the foot of the mountain, a sudden downpour drenched the students who were caught off guard. Yi Jian was sending their latest location to the command center of the field training for the third-year students when the sudden downpour, accompanied by a sudden clap of thunder, exploded directly above her head. Her heart inexplicably tightened. Chapter 41:14. Although it was drizzling, the current rain wasn't drizzling. Yi Qian wiped the rainwater off his face and turned to the students behind him. The mountain is slippery when it's raining. Hurry up. I'll speed up now. Be careful. Okay. The students who were on the same rope as her nodded. With Yi Qian leading the way, the neighboring team quickened their pace and descended the mountain. The 2 teams behind them also sped up and followed closely behind the 5-person team led by Yi Qian. A group of 15 people braved the rain and descended the mountain. It was said that going up the mountain was easier than going down. However, there was no path up or down the mountain. You had to rely on your own 2 feet. It was especially difficult to descend the mountain. They walked from halfway up the mountain to the foot of the mountain for an hour. At this time, the sky was completely dark. The rain didn't let up, and it hurt when it hit their faces. Assemble, assemble! The 5-person teams all safely descended the mountain. They stood in the heavy rain and untied the rope, then quickly put it away. With the assemble command, the 14 people lined up in 2 rows of 7. Under Yi Qian's command, they counted off from 1 to 14. The 14 students and the team leader, Yi Qian, had a total of 15 people. They had all assembled. Now they needed to enter the village for the night. Su Wen leaned close to Yi Qian. She swallowed a mouthful of rainwater and asked in a low voice, "It's raining so heavily. Are we supposed to train our courage tonight?" Courage training was also a type of outdoor survival training. It mainly tested the students' courage and courage. Yi Qian glanced at Su Wen, who was holding his arm tightly, and said with a faint smile, "Why? Are you so afraid that I'll let you train your courage? Don't you know that the more afraid you are, the more I'll test you?" "No way, Captain Yi. It's raining so heavily, and you're really arranging for us to train our courage?" Su Wen's lips twitched. Damn, if she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have come over to ask. Cheap mouth, cheap mouth. There was no way to train their courage in such heavy rain. According to the mission given to her by the academy, after entering the village, they would rest in the village's primary school for the first half of the night. At 11 o'clock at night, the 3 of them would walk around the mountain where the villagers' ancestors rested. The round trip would take about an hour, so it would take exactly 5 hours for all 15 of them to complete their courage training. Last year, the third-year students' field training was the same. It was said that a few male students were so scared that their knees went soft and they almost fainted. Yi Qian and Song Jichio, the vice-captain of the team, decided to come here to train their courage like what the juniors had done last year. Unfortunately, the weather was not on their side. In such a heavy rain, they could not make such an arrangement. What will come will come. No matter how scared you are, you can't avoid it. Do you understand? Yi Qian patted Su Wen's clenched hands and said calmly, "You can't avoid it, so why bother?" Su Wen's lips moved. Then, she leaned her upper body against Yi Qian's body and began to act coquettishly. Unfortunately, she acted coquettishly on the wrong person. Who was Yi Qian? She was Colonel Xia's soldier, who was trained to teach his girlfriend a lesson even if she made a mistake. No matter how good Su Wen was at acting coquettishly, it was useless in front of her. No matter how much she whined, he remained unmoved. Now that it was raining heavily, they would have to wait and see how the rain would turn out in the middle of the night. If the rain stopped, the courage training would go on as usual. Yi Qian did not let Su Wen hug him too tightly. Now, they needed to solve the problem of sleeping for the night. If it was not raining, they would find a flat mattress by the mountain and sleep on the ground like last night. Now that it was raining heavily, they had to think about something else. Let's go to the school to sleep. From here. Yi Qian squatted down with a flashlight and put the map on his knees. Song Jiqiu asked him to hold up a moisture-proof cloth above his head. Then, the two of them decided where to sleep for the night. Chapter 41:15. Going to a villager's house was definitely out of the question. They were not allowed to disturb the villagers during their wilderness survival training. If they went to a villager's house, they would be disturbing the villagers. Yi Qian's fingers, which were wet from the rain, were wrinkled. She swiped the map and decided to stay at a primary school about 5 kilometers away from here. There were a total of 3 villages in this mountainous area. The children in the villages all went to Wangjiao Hope Primary School. The village they were in now was called Liujiao. As the name implied, the villagers here all had the surname Liu, while the villagers in Wangjiao all had the surname Wang. When Su Wen heard that they were going to stay at a primary school tonight, she was very happy even though she was so tired that her legs were sore and swollen. Then there was no need for courage training. Passing by a few villagers' houses, which were covered in white plaster and peeling off, Su Wen, who came from the capital, had never seen such houses that were commonly seen in villages in the early 1990s. She couldn't help but take a few more glances. She saw that the dim tungsten lamp in the house was lit up by a flash of lightning in the pitch-black rainy sky. Under the pale white light, Su Wen saw the appearance of the whole house clearly. Her body trembled and she didn't dare to look anymore. Dark green tiles, mottled plaster walls, large patches of mud bricks exposed, and a few cracks on the main wall facade that even rats could crawl through. Looking at it, it didn't look like a villager's house at all. It was so scary that she panicked. This kind of mud brick house was very common in Yi Qian. Her hometown in Shuku village was still made of mud bricks until now. However, Uncle Chun repainted it with white plaster and polished the ground with colored stones. It was much brighter than the mud brick house Su Wen saw. Su Wen, who was seeing it for the first time, lightly patted her chest. She really didn't know that such a house existed. The main wall facade was cracked. Didn't this mean that it was dangerous? How could there still be people living here? Su Wen, who was holding a flashlight, lowered her head and walked. She didn't dare to look around anymore. The arrival of a stranger in the village startled the dogs raised by the villagers. Woof, woof, woof. The dogs barked in the heavy rain, adding a bit of desolation to the rainy night. A few more barks came from afar. Yi Qian, who was walking along the muddy path in the village, raised his head and saw 2 small green dots in front of him. He shone his flashlight over and saw a yellow and black dog in the middle. When the light shone on it, the dog clamped its tail and barked loudly at the strangers who had barged into the village. Yi Qian bent down and picked up a rock from the side of the road and threw it at the dog. He shouted, "Go!" The dog, which had been barking fiercely a second ago, suddenly withered. It whimpered and ran away with its tail between its legs. Dogs were known for their sensitive noses. The house dog immediately sensed the bloodthirsty aura of Yi Qian's action of throwing the stone. Dogs and babies could clearly sense the murderous aura emanating from Yi Qian, who had just walked out of the battlefield. That was why Yi Qian never hugged the babies, afraid that he would scare them. Principal Chen had reminded her before, and so had Xia Jinyuan. Xia Jinyuan had never hugged Xia Yiwei's twins, even once. The students behind them didn't notice anything, but the dogs in the village were a bit fierce. A few villagers who had closed their doors opened their doors again and shone their flashlights around their houses. After confirming that nothing had happened, they returned to their houses. The 5-kilometer mountain road was much more difficult to walk than the 5-kilometer road in the city. Every day, the primary school students in Lujiao would follow the path that Yi Qian and the others had taken to school. Everyone knew that it was difficult for the children in the mountains to go to school. Chapter 41:16. When they arrived at the school, the students' military boots were filled with rainwater. When they stepped on the rainwater, they could hear the sound of water splashing. The flashlights swept through the most magnificent 4-story primary school in the village. It was built with red bricks and white walls. Suwen whispered to Yi Qian, "These are the 2 best houses in the village." Indeed, they were in the best houses. After crossing 2 villages, all they saw were either mud brick houses from the 70s or 80s, or very simple red brick buildings without any paint on the outside. For the students who came from the big city, the visual impact was quite big. Suwon was one of them. If it were not for the field training in the forest area, she would not have known that mud brick houses still existed in this era. She had only seen mud brick houses in documentaries. Now they were in the forest area named by the ancestors of Huaxia after the wooden ladder. The 45 students in the class were divided into 3 groups. The field training lasted for 3 days and 2 nights. Yi Qian led the 3 groups to do the field survival training. The other 2 groups also finished the field survival training separately. Tonight was the 2nd night of the field survival training. Yi Qian's Group 1's accommodation was much better than the other 2 groups. The other 2 groups built temporary canopies in the heavy rain and made do with 1 night. Yi Qian's group walked into the Wangjiao Hope Primary School, which was built 2 years ago and donated by the philanthropists in Harbor City. It was 4 stories high and had students from the 1st grade to the 6th grade. This is the classroom for the 1st grade. Do you want to live in 1 room or 2? The person who led the students in was an old man who guarded the school in Wangjiao village. He was in his early 60s, with white hair and deep wrinkles on his forehead. However, his steps were very vigorous. The old man turned on the 2 tungsten lamps in the classroom and said in a clear voice, "There are many classrooms. You soldiers can sleep however you like." As the old man spoke, he looked curiously at the soldiers who had suddenly appeared in the school. He couldn't figure out what kind of soldiers these soldiers were. One moment they said they were students, and the next moment they said they were soldiers. How could they still be students after becoming soldiers? The classroom of an elementary school was not very big, but it was big enough for 15 students to sleep in. Song Jichu said with a smile, "Eldest uncle, we'll just stay in 1 classroom. We'll move the desks aside first. When we leave tomorrow morning, we'll move them back to the original place. I promise that we won't damage any of the desks or chairs." Don't worry. I'm not worried about the soldiers." The old man laughed and said. He looked at the tender faces of the soldiers and saw that there was not a single spot on their bodies that was dry. There were even 2 wet shoe prints on the side of their shoes. His heart ached as he said, "You bunch of soldiers, why are you still here in the heavy rain? I didn't hear that there were troops in the mountains. Let's all take a break. I'll get 2 pots of hot water. Have you guys not had dinner yet? I'll go to the cafeteria to start a fire and cook for you." When the students heard this, how could they trouble the villagers? They all said that they had eaten and were full. Song Jichio thanked the old man again and again. It was not until then that the old man left with doubt. "Eaten? What did you eat? Are you full from drinking rainwater?" Gnawing on tree bark? Tree leaves? The old man muttered to himself as he left the classroom. Several students who were wringing their wet clothes in the corridor heard this. They looked at each other and were a little confused. As soon as they entered the classroom, they asked their comrades. Eldest uncle said that we gnawed on tree bark and tree leaves. What did you say just now? Gnawing on tree bark and tree leaves? We didn't say anything. Eldest uncle didn't think that we were going for a long march, did he? Chapter 41:17. Yi Qian didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard the students' conversation. He said, Eldest uncle heard us say that we're full and was just joking. You took it seriously. Move the desks and chairs to the sides. The classroom is a little dirty. Change your clothes and clean it up. Su-Wen, He-Jing, go to the classroom next door and see if it's locked. If it's not locked, clean it up together tonight. Yes. Yes. The two of them immediately turned around and went to the classroom next door. From the first floor to the fourth floor, they found that all the classrooms were locked. Let's clean the corridor. The three female students turned on the lights and changed their clothes in the classroom. Then they waited for the male students to come in and change their clothes. While they were changing their clothes, Yi Qian, Su-Wen, and He-Jing began to clean the stairs from the first floor to the third floor. After a few minutes, the male students also came out and began to clean the corridor from the fourth floor to the first floor. There was strength in numbers. After a short while, the corridor and stairs from the first floor to the fourth floor were all cleaned up. They only needed to wash them with water. It was the same in the classroom. Even the cobwebs in the corners of the ceiling were cleaned up. The footprints on the walls that had been kicked by the children were wiped with a wet towel. There were only faint traces left. After cleaning up, the students sat in their chairs and had dinner tonight. 2 compressed biscuits for each of them and the mountain stream water in the kettle were their dinner. At 10 o'clock, the students went to bed. Yi Qian and Song Zhiqiu stood outside and discussed how to train their courage. It's raining heavily now. I just came to check the mountain in front. Yi Qian pointed in the direction they had come from. There's a tea garden over there. You and I will go there to put some things. Later, we'll divide into 2 groups. We'll patrol the tea garden and look for things. Then, we'll pick 2 kilograms of old tea leaves. What do you think? It's just a tea garden? Nothing else? Song Zhiqiu didn't believe that Yi Qian would only use such a simple method to train courage. She smiled and said, There must be something else. Yi Qian smiled. Didn't you notice it when you came here just now? There's a small hill next to the tea garden. They have to go through that hill to pass the tea garden. I saw many tombstones. In other words, what Su-Wen was afraid of could not be avoided. Song Zhiqiu rubbed her arms, feeling somewhat nervous. Can I tell you that I'm also a little scared? Ha ha ha, I'm not afraid, so what are you afraid of? Let's go. Take out the moisture-proof cloth and put it on. We'll go straight in. Yi Qian chuckled softly. She didn't sound scared at all. Song Zhiqiu laughed involuntarily. After a while she asked, Is there anything that scares you? Of course there are things that I'm afraid of. Yi Qian paused as he turned around to return to the classroom. He replied, Everyone is afraid of something, but walking in the dark is nothing to be afraid of. She had things she was afraid of, such as she was afraid that her comrades would sacrifice themselves, and she was afraid that the man she loved would be hurt. These were the things she was most afraid of, but she had to face them. Then you walk in front and I'll walk behind you. Song Zhiqiu, the vice-captain, could only follow him. She had no choice. She had to train her courage on a rainy day, which was even more terrifying than training her courage on a dark and windy night. Seeing Yi Qian and Song Zhiqiu walk out with the moisture-proof cloth, Su-Wen knew that it was impossible to avoid the courage training that night. She instantly felt uncomfortable. At 11:30, 5 male students and Su-Wen, the female student, were the first group of 6 to train their courage. The 6 of them put on the moisture-proof cloth and rushed into the heavy rain with flashlight. They needed to find the escape rope that Yi Qian had hidden in the tea garden and complete a round of patrol in the tea garden. In the meantime, each of them needed to pick 2 kilograms of old tea leaves. They needed the clean leaves instead of the tea branches. This was the courage training that night. In Yi Qian's words, "It's raining tonight, so I don't ask for too much." Chapter 41:18. Going up the mountain in the dark on a rainy day, every step was a test, especially when they had to pick 2 kilograms of old tea leaf. It was simply a torture to their body and mind. Yi Qian, who had slept for less than an hour, looked at his waterproof watch. When the first batch of students stepped out of the classroom, he had already started the timer. The time limit was 2 hours. The students completed the 3 tasks of patrolling, searching for objects, and picking tea leaves to train their courage. Song Zhiqiu, the vice captain, also did not sleep. She followed Yi Qian back from the mountain. He was scared by something that had come out of the cemetery when they passed by. When he returned to the classroom, he was still in a state of shock and did not feel sleepy at all. Now that the first batch of students had set off, he was even less sleepy because he was worried about them. This is the most basic courage training. The senior brothers and sisters who came here last time were luckier than us. They did not get caught in the rain, but they all camped around the cemetery for the night. Although we got caught in the rain, at least we could stay in the classroom. It's nothing if you can overcome the test in your heart. Yi Qian saw that Song Zhiqiu looked at her watch and looked outside from time to time. She looked a bit like her own child going out. As a father, he was anxious and worried. Yi Qian, who had gone through many psychological tests, did not think that the courage training tonight was difficult. The main thing was that he had to overcome the fear of the dark and the cemetery, overcome the psychological suggestion that was generated by the terror, and treat the night as the day. It was nothing if he could overcome the fear of the dark and the cemetery. Song Zhiqiu thought that she had turned the mountain path into a road just now. Every step was smooth and steady, and even her breath did not change. She could not help but ask, "I don't understand. Why aren't you afraid? People have an instinctive fear of the dark. Why doesn't it work for you?" Yi Qian thought for a while and answered, "Because I'm not affected by you." Jung's collective subconscious can explain why people are afraid. When one or more people in a group are afraid of the dark, the night is dark, the wind is strong, the hillside is full of ghosts, and the cemetery is full of ghosts. All of these will breed fear, which can affect the surrounding people to be afraid as well. I purposely arranged for Su-won to be in this batch, because there are 3 students who slept through the night until dawn. They are not afraid of the dark, and I want their boldness to help Su-won overcome her fear. Of course, it's also possible that they would be frightened by Su-won instead. For example, when a little guy suddenly rushed out, Su-won was frightened, and the comrades around her just happened to be tense, so they were also frightened. As for me, I've jumped out of the framework of the collective subconscious and focused on my own matters. Then, I think about things that are even scarier than walking at night. I basically don't feel anything anymore. To put it bluntly, it's a lack of courage training. When I go back, I plan to make a suggestion to the academy to see if we can set up a psychological education training group, which will be linked to combat research. During the usual training, we can add courage and psychological behavior training. I think this should be of great use to the students. As the team leader, Yi Qian was not only responsible for the arrangement of the students, but also needed to note down the various performances of each student in the wilderness survival training. She needed to remember and master the individual strengths and weaknesses, the difficulties that the team needed to overcome, and the shortcomings that needed to be improved. She needed to list all of these in detail in the report and submit it to the academy. Chapter 41:19. What Yi Qian had said involved the core of command, such as finding out the shortcomings of the rules in the combat command practice and exploring the effective ways and methods to carry out the combat command correctly. Coming up with a solution from a survival training in the wild required not only experience but also keen observation skills. Song Jiqiu fell silent because of Yi Qian's words. After a while she said, "We have been classmates for 3 years, but you have left us far behind. Now, all I can think about is how to let the students in the guts training complete the guts training task you set. I don't want any accidents to happen. As for you, you have already figured out the effective ways and solutions from the practice of the command system. Yi Qian, you have become the core figure in our class, the influential figure in the academy, and even the influential figure in the entire National Science and Technology University of Science and Technology, not by luck, but entirely by yourself. Strategy, combat, tactics. Have you been involved in all of them? Otherwise, how could you look at the whole situation and immediately figure out the solution?" Yi Qian was stunned. He did not expect Song Jiqiu to be so sharp. That was right. Song Jiqiu had always been at the top level in the class. She was excellent in intelligence, physical fitness, subjects, comprehensive, and other aspects. If she said so, she should have been involved in systematic listening and self-study, just like him. Yi Qian nodded slightly and did not deny it. He said with a smile, "In the beginning of my freshman year, someone told me that if I had extra time, I could learn about strategy in the first half of my freshman year. In the second half of my sophomore year, I would sit in if I had time. In the evening, I would take an hour to study by myself. Now I have already learned about the study of combat analysis. I planned to learn about strategy in my senior year. After I joined the army, I could learn more systematically from strategy. Now I just learned about it, but I didn't specialize in it." In the beginning of her freshman year, she planned to learn about strategy, combat, and tactic. In her senior year, she had completed the 4 major subjects. However, she still thought that she only knew a little about it. Even if she only knew a little about it, it was already amazing. Song Jiqiu looked sideways at Yi Qian. She saw that his expression was so indifferent that it seemed that he was talking about the most common thing. Song Jiqiu, who had become silent, held her forehead and sighed softly with an indescribable feeling. "Hard work will be rewarded. I see the best example in you. Yi Qian, you really have a strong sense of purpose. Logically speaking, girls are more emotional and are easily swayed by personal emotions. As for you, I can't see any emotional side to you. You're 10,000 times more rational than a guy. Mastering these 3 subjects is definitely not an easy task. We have our own specialized classes, training, and so on. But you've persistently taken out an hour to study every day. Yi Qian, in the entire class, you're the only one who can do that." Strategy was the study of the overall military combat guidance law. It was at the top of the military academic field, and could directly affect the study of military operations and battle technique. On the other hand, the study of military campaigns was a discipline that studied the laws of military campaigns and guided the practice of military campaigns. It was in the middle position between the study of strategy and the study of military tactics, and was subordinate to the study of strategy. For example, the most famous Sun Tzu's Art of War contained many guiding principles for military campaigns. Since China's military studies were formed and developed in the long-term Revolutionary War, since Yi Jian knew about military studies, it meant that she had basically learned about all the large and small battles that happened in China's modern history in the school library. Chapter 41:20. As for the study of military tactics, it was based on combat practice and theory. The content of military tactics was mainly reflected in the combat regulations, and decrees issued by the military. They were all rich in theoretical content. Yi Qian was already beyond the scope of the syllabus. No wonder Yi Qian could not be found even in the military academy. Even when she found someone, she was not idle. There were always various things to do. She really treated the 4 years in the military academy as a platform to absorb military knowledge. She did not want to waste a single second. She could even break 1 minute into 2 minutes to use. Yi Qian did not think that what she did was amazing. She had too many outstanding talents around her. For example, the man she loved deeply, Xia Jinyuan. There was Big Brotherly Demon King, who single-handedly carried the country's first maritime special forces. There was also the diplomat Qin Xiu, who was able to stand alone and win a war of words with the officials. There was also her grandfather, an aerospace scientist of the older generation. For an experiment, he could lose contact with the outside world and his family for years. Her father was the same. Like her grandfather, he was dedicated to the country. She knew what her father and grandfather talked about sometimes, but she did not understand what they meant. There was also Uncle Chen, a world-class sniper. There was also Grandpa Zhen, a first-class sergeant major who was still fighting and working at his post in his 70s. There were too many outstanding elders and peers around her. Sometimes she felt that it was a sin to slack off a little. She felt that she had wasted a great deal of her time. The best way to live up to her youth was to follow in the footsteps of the outstanding people around her, spur herself, and enrich herself. She had been reborn and had a second life. Therefore, no matter what, she could not let this second chance of glory go to waste. You have to know that even if you are tired, you are still alive. She did not want to close her eyes and sleep forever in the cold, dark, and damp underground. The Yi Qian of her previous life had completely disappeared. The current Yi Qian was a brand new person. She needed to constantly enrich herself and make up for all the glory that she had let down. After thinking about it, she smiled and said, "Perseverance is not difficult. The key is how far you want to go." The reason why I persevered was because I wanted to make myself more useful. I wanted to be able to step forward in times of danger to protect myself and my comrade. The idea is very simple. Apply what you have learned, protect yourself, and protect the people you care about the most. Yi Qian did not have much ambition. She did not think about what position she wanted to be in after learning so much. What kind of person she wanted to be. She had learned so much. At first, she wanted to take revenge. Later, she wanted to be able to stand beside the man she loved. Later on, she just wanted to be able to stand beside him. She wanted to be able to fight side by side with him and escape from death together. After Song Jiqiu heard that, she said after a long while, "We feel safe with you by our side. This time, the other two groups are very envious of our team." Therefore, Yi Qian had managed to protect himself and his comrade. Song Jiqiu, who did not know that Yi Qian had been on countless battlefields with real guns and bullets, had no way of knowing Yi Qian's deeper thoughts. Of course, Yi Qian did not need her to know. Therefore, she just smiled and calmly changed the topic. "We will be back in an hour. You go back to the classroom to have a rest. I will keep watch." Song Jiqiu said, "How can I let you keep watch alone? Let's stay together. I don't mind talking with you. I really want to chat with you. I can learn a lot from you." Chapter 41-21. Yi Qian couldn't help laughing. "I don't mind. As long as you don't blame me for being talkative." "What are you talking about? Don't you know that many students in the outer courtyard want to talk to you and learn from you?" Song Jiqiu also laughed. She didn't flatter Yi Qian. Indeed, she could learn a lot from him by chatting with him. Because she stood at a height that they hadn't reached yet, she could give them good advice and let them learn from her experience so that they could reach a higher level faster. During the 2 hours, Song Jiqiu chatted with Yi Qian. They talked about everything, including their studies, military affairs, and their personal views on military development in the future. Many years later, when Song Jiqiu saw Yi Qian appear in the news broadcast, she could still remember clearly what she and Yi Qian had talked about that rainy night. 2 hours seemed to pass quickly. Yi Qian saw a row of flashlights at the school gate and saw the students coming back in line in the rain. This was the first time that the students had participated in the wilderness survival training without any teachers. Moreover, the weather was so bad. When Song Jiqiu saw them coming back, she was about to stand up to welcome them. However, she was stopped by Yi Qian's cold voice. "You don't have to go. They are soldiers, not children." Song Jiqiu withdrew her foot and stood in the corridor on the first floor, waiting for the 6 people to come over. The 6 people had already seen the 2 figures standing in the corridor. Their military boots stepped on the rain-soaked ground, and they walked over quickly. "Line up. Attention. At ease. Count off. 1 kilogram of tea leaves, escape ropes, patrol tracks. Reporting, our group has completed all the bravery training. Please give us instructions." Lu Yang, who was in charge of leading the team, stood in the rain and reported to the Captain Yi Qian and the Deputy Captain Song Jiqiu, who had been waiting for them. Yi Qian walked into the heavy rain from the corridor. When his military boots stepped on a puddle of water, the mud splashed slightly. He, who was dry, was now drenched in the rain like the other students who had just returned. When he walked past the 6 people and saw the old tea leaves in their hands, Yi Qian randomly picked a student and grabbed the old tea leaves he had picked. Yes, they were all leaves without a single stem. It could be seen that he had been very calm when he had picked them. Think about it. The hill next to them was a graveyard. On a rainy night, everyone had to pick the tea leaves 5 meters apart. The fear brought by the environment was already deep enough. Now they had to pick 1 kilogram of old tea leaves alone. Without a certain amount of courage, even a minute of this training would be unbearable. In the end, Yi Jian walked in front of Su Wen. She paused and signaled Su Wen to turn on the flashlight in her hand and shine it on her face. Her small face had been drenched by the rain for a long time. Her skin was a little pale, but there was no pity in it. The girl from the capital had not teared up even though she had been scared. But when she heard Yi Qian's words, her eyes turned red instantly. Yi Qian could not help laughing when he saw that. He reached out and hugged Su Wen's shoulder. "You're still like a child. You're tearing up because of a compliment. Don't be ashamed." Okay, calm down. I just said you were brave, but you immediately exposed me." Su Wen was stubborn. She replied in a low voice, "I'm not crying. I'm just excited." Yi Qian wanted to praise her more, but he saw a few shaky flashlights coming from outside the school gate. Then, someone shouted in the rain. No one could understand what he said. Chapter 41-22. The people who spoke were all villagers in Wangjiao. Their voices were loud and anxious. They were almost shouting. Even the sound of the rain could not cover their voices. Song Jiqiu glanced at the school gate and said to Yi Qian, "I'll go and have a look. It seems that something happened." Okay. Yi Qian let go of Su Wen's hands. After seeing Song Jiqiu step into the rain, he withdrew his gaze and said to Su Wen in a low voice, "Go back to the classroom and have a good rest. You still have tomorrow." Before she answered, Yi Qian took a step back. His clear and melodious voice came into the ears of the 6 students through the rain. "You're dismissed and have a rest." The 2 hours of courage training had a great impact on the 6 students. They had conquered themselves and overcome their fears. When they heard the words, "dismissed and have a rest," they all relaxed a little. They were exhausted today. During the day, they had to use the escape rope to descend. At night, it was raining heavily. They had wondered whether Yi Qian would hide the escape rope in the place they were most afraid of. Fortunately, he did not. He hid it under a tea tree. Even so, the 6 of them had held hands for the first half-hour without letting go. Later, when they looked at the time, they had no choice but to separate. Now they had finally made it. The second group of students who had gone to train their courage gave them a round of applause. He Jing even gave Su Wen a big hug. She always liked to criticize Su Wen, but now she hugged Su Wen tightly. There was obvious excitement in her voice. 1Z, you're awesome. From tonight on, I'll have a whole new level of respect for you. Soo-won, who was always able to open a dye house after hearing that, became complacent immediately. Of course. Who am I, Soo-won? I'm not afraid of anything. There's no difficulty that I can't overcome. It's not a big deal to get caught in the rain at night. Hee-jing was speechless. She took a deep breath and resisted the urge to strangle Song Jichyo. She quickly withdrew her hands from Song Jichyo. She was afraid that if she hugged Soo-won, her hands would uncontrollably wrap around Soo-won's neck and then uncontrollably strangle her. Yi Chien stood at the door of the classroom and saw that the students who had completed the bravery training were overflowing with joy. There were no lingering effects of excessive shock. His smile deepened. Yi Chien raised his hand and knocked on the wooden door of the classroom that was painted with dark green paint. He knocked 3 times, and the noisy classroom immediately quieted down. The 7 students who had not finished their courage training stood in front of him and waited for Yi Chien's orders. Song Jichyo, who had learned about the situation, ran over in a hurry with her wet body. She stepped over the drainage ditch of the teaching building and arrived in front of Yi Chien in 2 steps. Yi Jian turned around and looked at Song Jichyo, who was standing in front of her. What's wrong? Song Jichyo asked Yi Jian. 2 of the villagers' houses collapsed, and everyone was buried inside. There was also an old man in another house who was afraid that the heavy rain would destroy the dam of the pond, so he went out with an umbrella and hasn't returned yet. The village leaders have called for people to save people and look for the old man. I just checked. None of them were in the prime of their lives. The village leaders said that all the young people in the village went out to work. Most of them stayed in the village for children and old people. Song Jichyo finished speaking in one breath. She wiped the rain off her face and asked Yi Chien in a deep voice, "The village leaders know that we're here and want us to help them. What do you think? They're still waiting for our reply outside." What do I think? I don't have much to say. I have to go. Chapter 41-23. Yi Chien said in a low voice, "We have to go there. We don't know the old people, so we don't know where they went. Let the villagers find them. Let's go and save the villagers buried under the collapsed houses." Soon, the village official who was waiting outside saw more than 10 soldiers with flashlights appear. At that moment, he only knew that he was relieved. He knew that the villagers buried under the house could be saved. The older generation had said that the most reliable people were the soldiers. He believed in the soldiers in front of him now. There are 4 people in one household. The grandparents have 2 children. The elder child is in the 4th grade and the younger child is in the 1st grade. There are 5 people in one household. The grandparents have 2 grandchildren, one 4 years old, one 2 years old, and an 80-year-old old man. Unforeseen disaster. Unforeseen disaster. The houses collapsed all of a sudden. Everyone is buried under the houses. I don't know if they're still alive. The village leader was so anxious that he stammered. They were all acquaintances. During the day they greeted each other. However, when the houses collapsed at night, everyone was buried under the houses. There was still a distance of 1 mile between the 2 houses. Yi Chien divided the 15 people into groups immediately. She led 8 people and Song Jichyo led 7 people to the houses where the houses collapsed. In the heavy rain, the houses made of mud bricks and tiles collapsed suddenly due to their age. Similar things had happened in Shuku village before, and it had happened more than once. First of all, you have to ensure your own safety. Leave 2 people to observe the surroundings. Once you see the houses collapse for the 2nd time, leave immediately. Don't try to be brave. When you go to the destination, you have to confirm the specific location of the buried villagers. Since it's so late and the villagers have already gone to bed, most of them are buried in the bedrooms. Search the bedrooms first. Pay attention to the beams of the houses. The beams of the old houses are all made of fir trees in the mountains. They're quite heavy. You have to be careful of the beams. There was no time to gather on the spot to give instructions. Yi Qian kept telling the students around her while running. The villagers needed to be rescued, but their own safety was also important. When Song Jiqiu led the team to leave, she said seriously to Yi Qian, "You need to pay attention to your own safety the most. Don't put yourself in danger. You can't be hurt. None of us can be hurt. None of us can be hurt. Vice Captain, I'll leave the safety of the students to you." Yi Qian had not expected to encounter such a dangerous situation during field survival training, so he could not help but feel worried. However, the students were not students who could not carry heavy responsibilities. They had been trained in the military academy, after all. In the future, they would all be walking down the path of becoming basic officers in the army. They all had their own capabilities, so he felt a little more at ease. They separated on a narrow and winding path. Yi Qian led a group of students to continue walking upward, while Song Jiqiu led another group of students to the nearest destination. By this time, the village official had also figured out who the leader was. As he led the way, he panted and said to Yi Qian, "This family is pitiful. My daughter-in-law despises us for being poor." Erwa ran away as soon as he was born. Sun went out to look for him, but he found Erwa. He's already in the first grade, but there's still no news. It's just an old couple taking care of their 2 grandsons. They don't have enough food to eat and clothes to wear. If it weren't for Harbor City sponsoring the 2 kids to go to school, our family would be even more difficult. They're already so pitiful, but God still wants to torture this old couple. Now, they don't even have a home. Hearing this, Su Wen's eyes turned red. Right now, it was not the time to care about how difficult the family's life was. Yi Qian asked calmly, "Did the villagers who discovered the bodies hear the noise downstairs? Did they call for them? Did they answer?" Chapter 41-24. The house is in such a state. The neighbor is in his 50s. Even if he was near, he would immediately come to find me. The village leader said anxiously. He was extremely anxious. "Please don't let anything happen. Please don't let anything happen to them." Yi Qian's heart sank. That means they don't know if the 4 people buried in the house are dead or alive. She reminded the village leader. "Please run faster. The earlier we get there, the earlier we can rescue them. The more we delay, the more dangerous it will be for the villagers buried below." Okay. I'll run faster. The mountain roads are not easy to walk on. Be careful. Those who took shortcuts couldn't even be considered small paths. All of them walked on the embankment of the fields. The embankment was uneven. In addition to the heavy rain, if they were not careful, they would fall from the embankment into the paddy field below. Yi Qian looked at the paddy field below, which was at least 2 meters high. He said to Su Wen, "Be careful. Don't step on empty air." I know. Don't worry about me. Saving people is more important. Saving people is more important." Su Wen did not care about herself at this moment. When she thought about the 2 elders and the 2 children, she wished she could grow a pair of wings and fly over. Although they were careful, their speed was too fast. A male student slipped and did not stabilize himself. He instantly fell from the high embankment into the paddy field below. Fortunately, it was a paddy field. The soft mud protected him. The student only fell and was covered in mud. In addition, he strained his ankle. It did not affect his ability to walk normally. They arrived at the destination safely. There were a few villagers standing around. When they saw the village leader had brought soldiers, they immediately gathered around. "Comrade, you came just in time. Hurry and save the 2 elders. They are buried under the bricks." We shouted for a long time but did not hear any response from inside. It's all collapsed. We don't dare to go near. We are afraid that we will step on the bricks and collapse again before we can save them. Comrade, you make the arrangements. You see how we can help. We will listen to you. But we have to save them first. There are still 2 children. Nothing can happen to them. We just took a look. The 2 beds were buried under the brick. We don't know if anyone is lying on them." The villagers who had gathered around him were talking amongst themselves. Yi Qian shone his flashlight at them and his heart instantly sank. Other than the left wall of the main hall, everything from the kitchen to the main hall to the bedroom had collapsed. Even the shack used to feed the livestock had collapsed, and the howling of pigs could be heard from below. Pigs squeal. If pigs were alive, humans would definitely be alive as well. Yi Qian calmed himself down and immediately began the rescue operation after giving a few instructions. The pig is still alive, so the person must still be alive. He didn't make a sound, so he must have fainted. If I need help from the villagers, I will definitely ask them to help. We have to go over and confirm it now. Please be quiet. I'm afraid we won't be able to hear what's going on down there. Okay. We won't talk. The anxious villagers seemed to have found their backbone. Especially when Yi Qian said, "If pigs are still alive, humans would definitely be alive as well." At that moment they really believed that the person was still alive. According to the village leader, the 2 elders and the 2 children slept in 2 separate bedrooms. One was on the left side of the main hall, and the other was on the right side of the main hall. Under the nervous gaze of the students, Yi Qian and Lu Yang slowly walked towards the collapsed bedrooms on the right and left sides. Chapter 41-25. Carefully stepping over several beams, Yi Qian swept the area with the flashlight. First, he swept the area where the wooden bed was. He couldn't see the bed here, only 2 pieces of wood that looked like a bed frame. Yi Qian's mouth was pressed a little. If the person really slept on the bed, then the odds were against him. The flashlight shone around and swept to a black hole made by beams and mud brick. Slowly approaching, he shone the flashlight into the black hole and shouted, "Is there anyone down there? Is there anyone down there? Answer me if you hear me, answer me if you hear me." Lu Yang also shone her flashlight down and shouted, "Is there anyone? Is there anyone? Answer me if you hear me. Can you hear me? Answer me if you hear me." Everyone held their breaths, waiting for someone to respond. After waiting for a while, Yi Qian's mouth was pressed tightly. Lu Yang shouted again, afraid that he couldn't hear him. His voice was like a tearing roar. Finally, he heard a very faint sound from below, like something was knocking. Hearing the sound, Lu Yang carefully lay down. He seemed to have heard something just now. Is there someone down there? Is there someone knocking something down there? Hearing the sound again, Lu Yang raised his head and shouted excitedly at Yi Qian, "Captain, Captain, over here! There's a sound here! I hear it, I hear it! Someone! This is great! This is great!" The villagers waiting in the rain were overjoyed and shouted at Lu Yang, "That's the room where Dewa and Grandpa sleep. It must be Dewa and his grandpa." "What about Dewa and Grandma?" Yi Qian shouted again, but he still didn't hear anything. Then they could only try their best to rescue Dewa and Grandpa in the left bedroom. They needed to move the mud bricks away one by one, and then carefully move away the beams that had been smashed. They couldn't move them at will, they had to pick them up and move them. As the rain continued to fall, thunder rumbled and lightning flashed across the pitch-black sky from time to time. As the lightning flashed, the villagers who were moving the bricks saw their most trusted soldiers moving and digging with their bare hands. And their faces looked even younger than their own children and grandchildren. Although they were small, it made the villagers feel at ease. Perhaps it was their military uniforms that made them feel at ease. As time passed, more and more mud bricks were moved out. They were getting closer and closer to the place where Lu Yang had heard the knocking sound. She moved the 2 beams at the top away and the broken bricks away. Yi Jian saw a collapsed cupboard. The cupboard was not completely collapsed but was half empty. She shone the flashlight on it and saw a child's shoe and a small hand. At that moment Yi Qian's hair stood on end. He turned his head and shouted, "Quick! Carrying bricks! Carry bricks!" The small hand was a child's hand, and the child was clamped under the overhead wardrobe. There was an old-fashioned wardrobe in the bedroom, as well as a large wooden cabinet used to store all kinds of dry goods. He hadn't noticed it before because it was completely covered by the collapsed beams. As the beams were lifted one by one, and the mud bricks on top of them were removed, a few low and painful moans could be heard. It was not the voice of a single person, but the voices of an old couple. "Raise the beam. Slow down. Slow down. Give me the escape rope. Tie it to the largest beam and pull it tight. Don't let it collapse a second time." After the second rescue, the first old man was carried out. The old man's head was full of blood. The rain drenched his face. "The child is in the cupboard. The child is in the cupboard. Save my child. Two people." He almost used all his strength to finish his words. Yi Qian held the old man's hand and said, "Don't worry, we will definitely save the child. Don't worry." Chapter 41:26. The entire rescue process involved the emotions of everyone present. The villagers saw the soldiers, whose faces were even younger than their own children and grandchildren, carrying the heavy mud bricks with their bare hands. They saw them carrying the fallen beams with their shoulders. Their faces were covered in mud, and even the rain couldn't wash their faces clean. "Pull tight. 1, 2, 3, pull. Remove all the mud bricks at the top. Bring a raincloth over to shelter the children from the rain. The two of you, remove the mud bricks from the top of the wardrobe. The two of you, go down and take them. I'll trouble the villagers to help me move the mud bricks away." The clear voice of the female soldier, who had been standing at the top and constantly moving mud bricks, pierced through the curtain of rain like a lark. Every word floated clearly into everyone's ears. She was very calm, without a trace of panic. The entire scene was commanded by her alone, and everyone listened to her command. No one would make their own decisions. At this time, the village leaders were outside cooperating with Yi Qian. They took the mud bricks from above and threw them to the side. They were all working hard to save the two children. The rescued grandmother was carried by a student. A villager held a flashlight to illuminate the way, and they walked quickly to the neighbor's house. The old woman, whose head was bleeding, kept muttering about her two grandsons. Sometimes she would call them Dawa, and sometimes she would call them Xiaohua. Her low cries of pain made the students carrying her shed tears. "Don't worry, we're here. With us here, we'll definitely save Dawa and Xiaohua. Don't worry." The student's voice was calm and comforting. He was afraid that the old woman wouldn't understand, so he emphasized his words very slowly. The villager who was holding an umbrella and a flashlight also said, that's right. Don't worry. Dawa and Xiaohua are lucky to have met a soldier. Don't worry, we'll definitely save them." The old woman didn't know how to speak Mandarin. She spoke intermittently with a heavy local accent. The student carrying her with his head lowered could vaguely hear it. It seemed like she kept saying, "Thank you." When the grandmother was placed in the neighbor's house, Yi Qian had already jumped into the dug hole. Her hand was already holding the small hand outside the wardrobe. Her fingers pressed on the small wrist, and the pulse passed through her fingertip. Yi Qian's spirit was lifted. "It's fine. The child was fine." Now they needed to lift up the collapsed wardrobe. Other than Su-Wan, who was standing on the periphery and staring at the broken wall, the other 5 students all stood on top of the pile of mud brick. They sped up and moved all the mud bricks around the wardrobe away. No one spoke. They only buried their heads in moving and moving. They all heard the small hand under the wardrobe. Grandma said that the 2 children were hiding in the wardrobe. One was a wardrobe, and the other was a big wooden cabinet. It just depended on which cabinet it was. Finally, all the mud bricks around the wardrobe were removed, and the rainwater and mud fragments were removed. Finally, it was time to lift the wardrobe. Yi Qian held the small hand that was slightly cold from the rain. She bent down and shone the flashlight into the corner of the wardrobe. Yi Qian finally understood why there was an angle when the wardrobe was tipped over. This was because the child's grandfather had used his own body to block the wardrobe. Then, a few mud bricks rushed out and blocked the wardrobe from falling down. In this way, there was only enough space for the child. Lift the cabinets, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Chapter 41-27. The heavy wardrobe was finally lifted by the students to a gap that allowed Yi Qian to crawl in and carry the child out. The students who lifted the wardrobe took a deep breath and then made a hand signal to Yi Qian. Yi Qian immediately let go, and with her slender frame, she crawled into the gap. The child's cries came from the rainy night. The villagers outside could tell that it was the child's cries, and all of them cried tears of joy. Little baby is fine, he's fine. God has opened his eyes, God has opened his eyes, little baby is fine. Quick, quick, go get little baby. Little baby, come out, and elder baby, and grandpa. Yi Qian crawled out from the gap with the crying child in her arms. Just as she was about to crawl out, there was a loud banging sound coming from the wardrobe. Someone was knocking on the wardrobe, followed by the sound of crying. Grandpa, Grandma! Grandpa, Grandma! The child in the wardrobe was terrified. He cried loudly and banged on the wardrobe door. He wanted to go out, and find Grandpa and Grandma. Yi Qian came out with the child in her arms. She climbed on top of the mud bricks, rushed down in a few steps, and handed the child over to a villager who had reached over earlier. There's another child in the wardrobe. I'm afraid that the child's grandpa has already met with misfortune. The person who took the child was a village woman. Hearing this, her eyes darkened and she hugged the child tightly. At least the two children are fine. It's fortunate. Yes, at least the two children were fine, and the child's grandma was fine. It was fortunate in the midst of misfortune. 2 students used a beam to prop up the wooden wardrobe's roof. Yi Qian and the other 3 students used their shoulders to lift the heavy wardrobe bit by bit. Finally, the entire wardrobe was facing the sky, and there was a bang sound coming from inside. Lu Yang opened the wardrobe door and saw Elder Baby that the villagers were talking about. Elder Baby, come to Big Brother. Big Brother will take you out. Lu Yang reached out her hand and smiled at the crying Elder Baby. Big Brother will take you out to find Grandma. Come, stand up carefully. Elder Baby, who was in the 3rd grade, got up and then rushed into Lu Yang's arms. His hands tightly wrapped around Lu Yang's neck, and he cried even louder than before. Lu Yang pressed down on his head and continued to climb out without stopping. Yi Qian squatted beside Elder and 2nd Baby's grandpa. Her eyes were slightly lowered. She loosened her clenched fists and said to the students beside her, "He is gone." In order to protect his 2 grandsons, his grandfather first used his body to block the falling wardrobe. His head was then hit by the falling brick. In the end, his entire head was buried by the brick. He used his own curled-up body to protect the child, not letting the child get hurt at all. In Grandpa to save his grandpas, the students stood to the side, ants to the side. Come lift. Yi Jian stood up straight and said to her comrades with a slightly suppressed voice, "We have to get Grandpa to a clean place." All right, the students' noses were a little blocked, and they began to carry the old man out. Su-Wen, who had been standing outside, stared at the only remaining wall that had not collapsed. Her mission was to keep an eye on the surroundings to prevent another collapse. She stared closely and saw a brick suddenly fall from the top of the wall. Yi Qian, get out of the way! Yi Qian and the others were carrying the old man out when they suddenly heard Su-Wen's tearing roar. Yi Qian, who was behind her, looked up and saw that the only remaining wall was shaking. She shouted sternly, "Get out of the way, Su-Wen!" Chapter 41-28. The 5 of them could escape, but Suwon was the one who was in real danger. She was the closest to the broken wall. After Yi Qian shouted, a black shadow with light suddenly rushed over and hugged Suwon. The 2 of them rolled out several times. Bang! Bang! With the sound of collapsing, the broken wall shook several times and collapsed completely. Several heavy mud bricks happened to hit the place where Suwon had stood just now. The villagers who were watching the scene were so scared that their heartbeats became irregular. Are you King stupid? Don't you know how to get out of the way? The angry shout exploded above Suwon's head. It was Song Jiqiu, who had finished the rescue on the ground and came up to check the situation. The rescue on Song Jiqiu's side was much smoother than that on this side. He asked the students to take the rescued adults and children to the neighbors' houses. Then he followed the villagers to lead the way and rushed to Yi Qian's side. He walked a few steps faster and saw the extremely thrilling scene just now. Suwon was also a little confused. She had just reminded Yi Qian and the others to be careful and had forgotten whether she was safe or not. After being shouted at by Song Jiqiu, she blinked her eyes. She, who had just spoken, suddenly gasped. She did not know what her shoulder had bumped into, but it hurt a lot when she exerted a little strength. After shouting, Song Jiqiu got up. With a pale face, he picked up the flashlight that he had thrown out just now and shone it directly on Suwon's face. He gnashed his teeth and said, "You were almost hit by those mud bricks that weighed about 20 kilograms. I know." Suwon frowned. She supported herself with one hand and stood up. She asked Song Jiqiu if he was all right. Song Jiqiu shook her head. Before she answered, Suwon had run away. She went to ask Yi Qian about the situation on the other side. After several hours of rescue, all of them were barehanded. Their fingers must have been scratched. Seeing this, Song Jiqiu inevitably clenched his teeth more tightly. She cared about Yi Qian. Why didn't she think about herself just now? The frightened village cadre hurried over and asked Suwon if she was all right. Suwon smiled and said, "I'm all right. I'm all right. Thanks to my comrade just now." "That's good. That's good. If something had happened to you, our whole village would have been sinners." Hearing that she was all right, the village cadre gradually calmed down. He was the one who brought the soldiers over to save them. If something happened to them, he, as a village leader, would not be able to answer to the troops and the soldiers' families even if he committed suicide. At the end of the rescue work, Dehua and Xiaohua were placed in the neighbor's house. Grandma, whose head was slightly bandaged by the bandages in the student's hygiene bag, saw her old partner's cold body. Her somewhat turbid eyes widened, and her whole person fell down in a daze. After settling the villagers down, the other group of students followed the villagers and rushed towards Yi Jian. Before they went up the hill, they saw lights flashing on the path hidden in the trees ahead. It was Yi Jian and the others returning to school after the rescue mission. He Jing and the others who came up to greet them wanted to ask about the situation, but when they got closer, they felt that the atmosphere was stifling. Their comrades were all lowering their heads slightly, and they were all in low spirits. Something happened. Back at school, everyone was in a heavy mood. The students, who had changed their clothes, lay on the moisture-proof mattresses. Although they all closed their eyes, they were actually thinking about something. It was not the first time that Yi Qian had been on the verge of death. She felt Suwon, who was sleeping beside her, twitching her shoulders. She leaned to one side and said to Suwon, "Go to sleep. We have to hurry on the road tomorrow morning. You only have 2 hours to rest." Chapter 41-29. Suwon couldn't get rid of the image of the old grandma falling straight down with a desperate expression on her face. As long as she closed her eyes, she would think of that scene. She was so desperate as if the sun would not rise the next day. She was so desperate as if her whole life would become gray. It was too heavy, too sad, and it made her breathless. "Captain, how do you think Dehua, Xiaohua, and Grandma will live?" Grandpa is gone, and the house has collapsed. Su Wen asked softly, her nasal voice was heavy. There will be a solution. Go to sleep. Yi Qian said this sentence not only to Su Wen, but also to his comrades who faced life and death for the first time. No one spoke again, and no one mentioned anything about what had happened. The 2 hours of rest passed quickly with a short nap. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the students got up on time, packed their backpacks, and arranged the desks and chairs in the classroom in a straight line. A group of 15 people turned and entered the rainy and misty forest. Today was the last day of their wilderness survival training. They would arrive at the destination at 6 o'clock in the evening. They had to hurry. After a night of chaos, the village leader, who finally cleared up the matter, rushed to the school at 6 o'clock in the morning. He also wanted to invite the soldiers who helped them last night to his home for breakfast. As a result, when he arrived, the school was empty, and there was no trace left. Looking at the neat desks and chairs in the classroom, the village leader turned around, closed the classroom door again, and returned to his home. At the critical moment, the people's soldiers were still reliable. Back home, the village leader said to his wife, "In times of crisis, it was always the people's soldiers who stood up and used their bodies to build the Great Wall, protecting the people on the land they loved deeply." Xia Jinyuan, who was far away abroad, was the same. Melbourne, which had a 14-hour time difference with China, was still at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on May 2nd. Xia Jinyuan, who was in a seaside hotel in the northern Caribbean, wore sunglasses and stood behind Cobra expressionlessly, observing the transaction between Cobra and a black man. The TV in the room was broadcasting the latest news. The famous economist, Jesse Morris, committed suicide in prison by stabbing the handle of his toothbrush into his throat. Cobra glanced at it, and the corner of his mouth showed a cold smile. He said to the black man who made the transaction with him, "What a poor guy. He crossed the bottom line of good people. He has met God. Everyone is happy." The black man who completed the transaction picked up the wine glass with red wine, made a toast to Cobra, and took the lead to take a sip. "Yes, I am happy too," Cobra replied with a smile, and took a sip of red wine. Half an hour later, Cobra personally sent away the client who had taken a large amount of drugs from him. When he returned to his room, he stopped smiling and revealed his usual gloomy expression. He said coldly to his bodyguard, "Tell the people below to get ready. I just saw the Chinese diplomat walk into the elevator. He's already staying here." Xia Jinyuan did not speak, and only nodded lightly. Tonight, Cobra made a move on Qin Xiu. Tonight, it was also Luke who made a move on Cobra. Similarly, it was time for him to leave tonight. Chapter 41:30. At night, the beach was still full of revelry. Countless young people were chasing each other on the soft beach. The night was getting darker, but the laughter on the beach was still there. Some people were playing electric guitars, some were playing drums, some were playing harmonicas, some were playing harps, and some were singing. They were all young people, singing and dancing. However, they didn't last long. Soon, someone came to drive them away. Yes, they were driven away without any reason. Some young people still wanted to resist, but they were pulled away by their companions because the people who drove them away had guns on them. Someone saw that they had guns on their waists. The lively beach suddenly quieted down, and the onlookers dispersed in twos and threes. The salty sea breeze blew over the sea rocks, and the sea water splashed on the beach, making a hua-hua sound. Cobra saw the crowd disperse on the beach, and with a gloomy expression, he closed the curtains that blocked the sun. He hated liveliness, hated the endless energy of those people, hated the lively smiles on their faces, and hated everything related to sunlight, including people. The curtains were drawn, and the room was plunged into darkness. Cobra, who liked to live in the dark, enjoyed it very much. He sat on the soft sofa, and his body sank, as if he was one with the sofa and the darkness. There was a faint fragrance of wine in the room. Cobra tasted the expensive red wine sent by the winery while quietly waiting for the dawn to come. In Qin Xiu's room, 2 armed police disguised as staff in plain clothes stared at the door vigilantly. Even though they were sitting, their backs were straight. In addition to the 2 armed police in the room, there was also a hotel food delivery service staff in the room. They were communicating with Qin Xiu in standard Mandarin. Xia Jinyuan disguised as a food delivery service staff and entered Qin Xiu's room. Tonight, the Russians will take action after Cobra makes a move on you. The 2 staff at the front desk are Cobra's men in disguise, and the doorman outside is also one of his men. There are also Cobra's men in the staff next to the elevator. When the rioters rush into the hotel, they will cooperate with the riot and make the whole hotel panic. Cobra will take the opportunity to get close to you. The Russians don't want to expose themselves, so they will also disguise themselves as rioters and take the opportunity to kidnap Cobra and bring him back to Russia. My mission here is to stop the Russians from bringing Cobra back to their country and kill them on the spot. Xia Jinyuan explained Cobra's entire plan in detail and also figured out Luke's plan. Cobra had too many secrets in his hands. He even planned to kidnap 2 nuclear bomb experts, but in the end, his plan was aborted because of the country's caution. If such a person was kidnapped by any country, he would be a bomb. Only by directly destroying him would people feel at ease. After listening to the whole plan, Qin Xiu's handsome face was as calm as before, without any panic. Pursing his thin lips slightly, he said, "In other words, I have now become the most important chess piece in the game, and tonight's riot will be caused by me? Am I right?" "TSK." Qin Xiu sneered coldly. His slender fingers gently covered the blue folder, and his dark eyes stared at Xia Jinyuan. His voice became even colder. "This Mr. Cobra really thinks highly of me. Such a big incident was caused by me. He had actually become the fuse for tonight's riot." Chapter 41-31. Xia Jinyuan could see the coldness in his eyes. "Unmoved," he said calmly, "because he's anxious to enter the Chinese market and our coastal areas. Over the past 2 years, our country's anti-espionage has made it increasingly difficult for him to grasp the movements of various Chinese military bases. Therefore, he's anxious to enter the Chinese market and get in touch with relevant personnel. He once kidnapped several scientists from our country. One of them was an expert in packaging airborne weapons. He almost succeeded. Later, the pirate working for him had a huge appetite and increased the bargaining chip. Cobra was so angry that he wanted to send people to secretly take care of the pirate. Our country's military took advantage of this gap and rescued the scientists. Since then, our country's anti-espionage has become stricter year by year. Cobra's spies were also uprooted by our country. He lost the eyes to understand the Chinese military bases. The forces behind him wanted him to speed up the process of entering the Chinese market, and you are his best entry point. He thinks that it's worth it to start a riot to get your attention and trust." Tch Qin Xiu put the folder aside. In his hands were several documents from the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission about the plans of our country's enterprises to enter this tourist city. As a diplomat, he came to meet with the local officials and then went further. Who knew that Cobra, whose alias was Crone, would unknowingly target him? A person who tried to steal our country's military secrets and even kidnapped our country's military weapons scientists. Moreover, he had some national secrets in his hands. Such a person would be a scourge no matter which country he fell into. Who knows when it will harm the Chinese side? I want to know if there's anything I need help with. For example, help you leave. Qin Xiu's clear eyes fixed on Xia Jinyuan. Oh, they were rivals in love, but in the end they became rivals in love and helped each other. This was a matter of great importance. Personal love was not important. The most important thing was to put the country first. Xia Jinyuan said calmly, "No, I just came to tell you that there will be a riot after 12 o'clock. Protect yourself well and don't let Cobra succeed." This is a madman. It's very likely that he will change his mind midway and turn the riot that was originally to gain your trust into a riot that will really kill you. There are too many rioters in this country. It's common for a few officials to die. If something happens to a country's diplomat, it's a matter between countries. It has nothing to do with Mr. Crone, who is also a victim of the riot. Since he has arranged such a plan, he has enough ways to retreat and not get into any trouble. Xia Jinyuan got up. He had been here for 5 minutes. Now he needed to go back to his room and wait for 12 o'clock. Be careful, Major Xia. Qin Xiu stood up and stretched out his hand. The moment they shook hands, Qin Xiu pursed his lips slightly and said, "Don't forget that someone is waiting for you to go back. For her sake, I wish you safety and success." Xia Jinyuan looked at the young diplomat, who was about the same age as him, and nodded slightly. "Thank you for your concern." He turned and walked towards the door. When he got to the door, he stopped and turned back. "You've seen her, haven't you?" he asked. "Are you all right?" Chapter 41-32. The diplomat, who had always been calm, was stunned by Xia Jinyuan's words. After a while, Qin Xiu, who did not know that Xia Jinyuan was a lieutenant colonel, laughed and asked, "Major Xia, you don't even know if your girlfriend is good or not. Why would you ask me this question? She's probably a suitor. Don't you think it's funny?" He really did not expect that he would need to know about his girlfriend from him. Xia Jinyuan turned around and looked at Qin Xiu, who was full of sarcasm. "It's been a long time since we last met. I can't help but ask a question when I meet an acquaintance in a foreign land. It's been a long time since we last met." Qin Xiu suddenly remembered his call with Commander-in-Chief Xia. Commander-in-Chief Xia told him that Xia Jinyuan would not easily contact China, so he definitely could not contact Yi Qian. In order to fulfill his responsibilities and carry out the mission, Xia Jinyuan cut off all contact with China. If something really happened, China would not be able to know immediately. Qin Xiu's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry I acted rashly. Yi Jian, she was not very good." These words were already on the tip of his tongue, but Qin Xiu slowly swallowed them back down. He said calmly, "She returned to the capital. I met her at Dangue Garden. Her vitality was good and she seemed to be doing well. Everything is fine. You don't have to worry." Xia Jinyuan was carrying out a high-risk mission. If he knew that Yi Qian was not doing well in China, he would definitely be worried. With worry came distraction. Xia Jinyuan, who was carrying out a high-risk mission, could not be distracted by this. In the end, Qin Xiu chose to hide it. "Later, I met her at the airport. I came to Maribel and she went back to the military academy." Qin Xiu's answer made Xia Jinyuan frown. Dangue Garden, the capital. No, why did she suddenly return to the capital? Since she was demoted to a basic company, she should have gone back to school directly after returning from Myanmar. Why did she come to the capital? How is old Master Fu? Where's Uncle Fu? Xia Jinyuan did not ask directly. Instead, he asked indirectly, making it hard to guard against. Qin Xiu replied, "Old Master went to the laboratory of a certain aviation base. Uncle Fu has been at the Northwest Aviation Missile Base all this time. He didn't even come back for the new year." It meant that everything was at ease and there was nothing to worry about. Then why did his little fox return to the capital? Yi Qian didn't know that old Master had gone to the laboratory. He called home but no one answered, so he hurriedly rushed back to the capital. This was Qin Xiu's explanation to Xia Jinyuan, which made Xia Jinyuan feel slightly relieved. There were no flaws at all. It was very much like Yi Qian's style of doing things. Xia Jinyuan frowned for a moment before relaxing. He bowed slightly to Qin Xiu to express his gratitude. Thank you. Be careful tonight. Bullets don't have eyes. Goodbye. Take care. Goodbye. Qin Xiu nodded and accepted Xia Jinyuan's thanks. Why not accept it? He accepted it with a clear conscience. After the door closed, Qin Xiu sat back down on the sofa. When he was about to pick up the glass of water on the coffee table to drink, he unknowingly took out his cell phone from his trouser pocket. He must have unconsciously taken out his cell phone when he sat back down on the sofa. Who did he want to call with his cell phone? Qin Xiu did not reach for the glass of water. Instead, he lowered his head and stroked the keys on his cell phone with his slender fingers. Who did he want to call? The face that appeared in his mind was the person he wanted to call. He wanted to tell her that Xia Jinyuan, who was abroad, was at ease and did not need to worry. Chapter 41-33. He wanted to tell her that the man she loved deeply would soon return to China. If she had any difficulties, she could choose to tell her boyfriend. She didn't have to deal with it alone. Yi Qian's name and phone number appeared on the screen. It was not his personal phone number, but the school's number. After staring at the name, Yi Qian, 4 dozens of seconds, Qin Xiu threw the phone on the coffee table. He raised his hand, pursed his thin lips, and pulled at his tie irritably. He raised his neck and his Adam's apple bob. He unbuttoned the top button of his meticulously buttoned shirt and loosened his tie. He also unbuttoned his shirt, revealing his smooth muscles. He looked very powerful and did not look like a civil official at all. The premise was that you had to ignore his handsome face. At this time, the young diplomat who had always maintained a strict and elegant image showed a trace of decadence that he had never shown before. Damn it! He cursed in a low voice. His voice was a little loud, causing the 2 armed policemen to look at him in surprise. Just now they didn't hear it wrong, right? The ambassador who had always been strict actually cursed? Qin Xiu only knew how to curse, and it was. He really couldn't think of any curse words that could well express his feelings at this time, so he cursed something that even a child would know. It was obvious that Qin Xiu was a diplomat who didn't even know how to curse. As for why he suddenly cursed, only Qin Xiu himself knew. Ambassador, if what the Major said just now is confirmed to be true, we recommend that you be equipped with a pistol for self-defense. The armed policemen put away the surprise on their faces and went straight to the topic, seriously making their suggestion. Although the North is a tourist city, Melbourne is known internationally for its chaos. Gangs, riots, guns, and so on are all labels of this country. If there is a riot tonight, you need a gun to defend yourself. Qin Xiu pursed his lips and said, "It's not that there is a riot, it's 100% confirmed that there will be a riot." He believed Xia Jinyuan's words without any doubt. The commander-in-chief had reminded him that he must not disturb Xia Jinyuan to avoid arousing Cobra's suspicion. When he met Xia Jinyuan that time, no matter how shocked he was, he restrained his gaze. After seeking confirmation from his country, he was even more glad that he had restrained himself at that time. Xia Jinyuan had taken the risk of being exposed to inform him of such a dangerous mission. Therefore, he believed that there would definitely be a riot tonight. When Xia Jinyuan came in disguised as a waiter, the shock in her heart was no less than when she first met Xia Jinyuan. He risked his life to inform him that there would be a riot here tonight. He had no reason not to believe him, let alone question the sincerity of a soldier who was loyal to the country. "You're right. I do need a handgun for self-defense. Tonight, you two will stay in my room. If anything happens, we can deal with it together." "Yes." The 2 armed policemen answered in unison and gave Qin Xiu a fully loaded pistol. It was not midnight yet. Qin Xiu simply went back to his room to rest, while the two armed policemen rested in the room outside to save energy to deal with the following chaos tonight. The night was getting darker, and the sound of the waves on the beach was getting louder. There were even bigger waves hitting the reef, and the water splashed high and then fell back into the sea. The tide rose and fell endlessly. Luke, who had opened the window and listened to the sound of the waves hitting the rocks, had smoked countless cigarettes. There were at least 5 cigarette butts in the glass ashtray. He smoked too much, and there was a strong smell of cigarettes in the room. Chapter 41-34. Luke took 2 deep puffs of the cigarette between his fingers, causing the cigarette to sparkle. Before he could finish the cigarette, he stubbed it out in the ashtray and left his room with the smell of smoke. He then knocked on Xia Jinyuan's door. Cobra did not let Xia Jinyuan or Luke be on duty tonight. The two of them were his backup plan, and he would let them appear when he needed them. When Xia Jinyuan heard the knock on the door, he looked through the peephole and smirked. He opened the door and the smell of smoke wafted in. Xia Jinyuan showed a look of disgust and blocked Luke from entering the room. "If you have something to say it here." His disgust made Luke touch his forehead. "Buddy, can you be a little more like a man and not as clean as a woman? I want to sit in your room right now." "You should sit in a woman's room, not in my room." Xia Jinyuan was unmoved and continued to stop him. The door opposite the room opened and Cobra's bodyguard stood at the door. He said to Xia Jinyuan, "Mr. Cobra said you should rest. Xia, let him in. Don't cause trouble." Only then did the long leg that was blocking Luke's path lift up. The air was somewhat cold as he let Luke in. The bodyguard closed the door. "Xia, I feel uneasy about tonight's planned riot. The Chinese ambassador shouldn't be so stupid as to fall for it so easily." As soon as he entered, Luke frowned and said uneasily, "He brought 2 staff members with him. They don't look like ordinary staff members. They look more like bodyguards." Hearing this, Xia Jinyuan glanced at him and thought to himself, "This guy is indeed a soldier. He's always so sensitive to the same aura." "Are you afraid that something will happen to you?" Xia Jinyuan sat on the sofa and looked up at Luke, who was leaning against the bar counter. "This kind of thing happens all the time. You don't have to worry. What I want to say is, if something really happens, you should protect yourself. To be honest, Cobra seems to trust you, but if he finds himself in danger, he will definitely use you as a shield. Just like that time in Myanmar, he chose to abandon you without hesitation. I mean, if something like this happens again, Xia, you have to live for yourself. Do you understand?" It turned out that he was reminding him to protect himself during the Russian operation tonight. They had been partners for more than a year, so there was still some friendship between them. Xia Jinyuan did not speak, but his eyes darkened as he stared at Luke. "I'm working for Mr. Cobra now. I can't run for my own life. Sorry, I can't do that. There's still a fierce battle tonight. I need to rest early. Goodbye." Xia Jinyuan, who did not intend to reveal his identity, got up and walked towards his room. Behind him, Luke's expression kept changing as he stared at Xia Jinyuan's back for a long time. Just as Xia Jinyuan entered the bedroom and was about to close the door, he raised his voice and said, "I hope you live well, my partner. Live well. Live well for yourself. Tonight. You made me feel strange. Find a woman to sleep with and everything will be normal," Xia Jinyuan said coldly and closed the door. Standing behind the door, he heard the sound of the door closing after a while. Luke wanted to tell him that the Russians had put him on the kill list. Otherwise, they would not have emphasized live well. This was a bit tricky. With the Russian signal flag special forces taking action, it would be difficult to get out of their hands unscathed. Xia Jinyuan sat on the edge of the bed and cleaned up the bullets while thinking about how he could escape safely. Chapter 41-35. It was a simple matter for Xia Jinyuan to get rid of Cobra and escape during the chaotic battle. What was not simple was how to get himself back to the country unscathed. It was now the May Day holiday in China. Xia Jinyuan planned to report back to the military first, and then immediately rush to the University of Science and Technology of China to see his beloved girl. He knew that Yi Qian was worried about him, and that she had been waiting for him to come back. For the sake of Yi Qian, who was looking forward to his return day and night, he could not let himself get hurt. He needed to return to the country unscathed. It would be a little difficult to return to the country unscathed. He reloaded the bullets back into the magazine one by one, opened the wardrobe, and put on the bulletproof vest. Xia Jinyuan turned off the lights and lay on the bed, thinking about how to get away and quietly waiting for the riot to arrive. Upstairs, Qin Xiu had already fallen asleep. It was not until his phone alarm beeped that two armed policemen outside gently knocked on the door. Qin Xiu, who suddenly opened his eyes, quickly reached under his pillow and then got out of bed to open the door. "Ambassador, there's a situation outside," the policeman who knocked on the door said in a low voice. In the dim light of the floor lamp, he saw that the policeman had already tightened his grip on his pistol. He skillfully loaded his pistol and asked calmly, "Has it already started?" "The entire hotel is under control. There are people outside who are ambushing us." Qin Xiu walked out and saw another policeman standing sideways at the entrance. His back was slightly arched like a beast that had just been released from its cage. His sharp eyes were observing the situation outside through the peephole. The policeman who was observing the situation outside slowly returned to the room and said in a deep voice, "The sofa and coffee table are blocking the door. Put the safe on top and tie it to the bed. If there's a situation, immediately escape from the bathroom inside." The two policemen were responsible for protecting Qin Xiu's safety. When they checked into the hotel, they would not only observe the room, but also habitually observe the escape exits and hidden escape exit. Qin Xiu joined the push, and the three men quickly erected the sofa to block the door. On top of the sofa was a rather heavy safe. If someone forced the door open, the safe would be smashed outside. It might be able to smash one or two disguised rioters to death. Or if it smashed into the interior, it would block the sofa, and the people outside would have to expend a lot of energy and time to push the sofa away. The coffee table was pressed against the corner of the sofa, and another armed police officer quickly removed the steel wires of the two bathroom curtains. One end was wrapped around the DVD remote control, and the other end was wrapped around the remote control of the TV cabinet. The steel wires were stretched taut, and one end was fastened to the crack of the outer door, and the other end was fastened to the crack of the wardrobe. This was another simple but equally lethal defense. If someone rushed in, it was very likely that they would be strangled. The defense at the door was done. Qin Xiu had tied the bedsheets into a knot and placed them in the bathroom. Everything was ready. They were just waiting for the chaos to break out. Tap, tap, tap. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing beside Cobra, waited for the most exciting moment of the night to arrive. Luke, who was standing next to him, pursed his lips. He lowered his gaze and glanced at his partner. When he looked at Cobra again, there was undisguised hatred in his eyes. 6.5 years ago, his real partner from the Signal Flag team was brutally killed by Cobra at a port of the Megong River in Burma because his identity was exposed. That day, when he got off the ship, he immediately recognized the port where he got off the ship. It was the port where Cobra brutally killed his comrade. Cobra killed his comrades and took photos of the torture at that time. He openly provoked them by hacking the Russian government's official website and sending the photos back to Russia. The moment he saw the photos, he swore to find Cobra and avenge his comrades. Chapter 41-36. Tonight it was finally time. He would not let Cobra return to Russia alive. Tonight he would kill him and make this bastard disappear forever. There were still 16 minutes to 12 o'clock, and Cobra's men had all completed their infiltration. Then, some of them fell to the ground with their heads and bodies in a strange arc before they could even move. In the dark, there were at least 20 agile, signal flag, special forces soldiers disguised as hotel staff moving quickly. This was a special force that specialized in anti-subversion and guarding against foreign target. This time, Russia sent a squad of forces to infiltrate Melbourne and began a 6-year operation. They were all between 25 and 35 years old. They were very young and their combat ability was very strong. Even if there were only 20 of them, their combat ability was still very strong. According to the information provided by Luke, they quickly opened up 2 breakthroughs and quietly took care of the guys guarding here. Then, they replaced them with their own people. Spread out. Moving forward, they hid in the dark and slowly moved to the floor where Cobra was. Their mission was to capture the target alive and bring him back to China as soon as possible. The clock pointed to 12 o'clock and Cobra, who was staring at the time, smiled. Tonight, the big show prepared for the Chinese ambassador and the Melbourne officials began. Gunshots rang out without warning. At first, it was sparse and then suddenly the firepower increased. From the bang-bang sound to the clatter-clatter sound of chains being twisted, all the guests in the hotel were awakened in a short while. Those who had heard gunshots knew it was gunshots and reacted very quickly. The first thing they did was block the door. Those who had not heard gunshots reacted a little slower and wanted to open the window to see what was going on. The fire alarm in the hotel rang loudly, making a sharp ear-piercing sound to remind all the guests that danger was around them. This was deliberately sounded by Cobra disguised as a staff member at the front desk in order to alarm the guests in every room and make them run over in panic. Then, it was the massacre of the rioters. There were indeed guests who were awakened. They did not even change their clothes. The first thing they did was open the door and get ready to escape. These people thought there was a fire. As soon as they opened the door, there were cold and dark muzzles waiting at the end of the corridor. Some people ran out of the room and ran only a few steps before the bullets hit their bodies. The number of guests lying in a pool of blood in less than 2 minutes, more than a dozen people were dead. Ah! Screams rang out from all the floors, including the floor where Qin Xiu was. Hearing the gunshots and screams outside, Qin Xiu clenched his fists. The sound of chaotic footsteps and intense gunshots filled the entire floor. Qin Xiu retreated to the inner room under the cover of 2 armed policemen and began to leave through the inner window. Bang! 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 The sound of gunfire swept across the room. In less than a minute, all the locks were broken. Someone had started to kick the door. The door was not as easy to kick open as expected. The people outside instantly understood that their target had set up a trap inside. Cobra soon found out that his subordinates did not kick the door open to kidnap the Chinese ambassador. Just as his eyes darkened, gunshots rang out from the floor he was on. This floor was filled with his men, so it was impossible for gunshots to be heard on the floor where he lived. Without waiting for Cobra's order, Xia Jinyuan rushed to the door in a few steps. He opened the door gently and looked outside quickly. Then, he closed the door softly with a click. He returned to Cobra's side and said calmly, "There are people outside. They are not our people." Chapter 41-37. Not one of them? Then who was it? Cobra did not have time to think about who was outside. He only knew that he was in danger and had to leave immediately. Take good care of the Chinese ambassador. I hope that he can meet with him again tonight. Cobra got up and ordered Luke and Xia Jinyuan. He waved his hand and signaled his 4 bodyguards to cover him as he left. The gunshots outside were particularly chaotic. The guests in the rooms were already trembling in fear. They did not dare to go out or stay in their rooms. Countless people began to think of ways to protect themselves. Some blocked the door with sofas, some hid in the closet, some hid in the bathroom, and some boldly climbed out of the window. Their legs were trembling as if they would fall at any time. The hotel was already on alert. The city's government forces rushed to the hotel. They needed to rescue the local officials, and most importantly, the Chinese ambassador. The city's mayor was resting at home. When he heard that there was a riot in the hotel, he did not even put on his coat and immediately rushed to the government office. Several armed government forces and police officers rushed to the hotel at top speed. This was a premeditated riot. They needed to kill all the people who started the riot and find the mastermind. Alarms sounded all over the city, and all the entrances to the hotel were sealed off. The city was on high alert, entering a level 1 state of alert. Cobra's bodyguard saw several police cars parked below the hotel with flashing light. He lowered the curtains and quickly ran to Cobra, who was preparing to retreat, and whispered a few words to him. Xia Jinyuan did not pay attention. He was already holding a loaded pistol and was ready to break out. "Xia, stand next to me." Beside him, Luke suddenly said in a low voice, "You cover Mr. Cobra. I'll break out." He thought that he needed to send his best partner out of the hotel. Now he regretted not letting his partner leave earlier. Xia Jinyuan glanced at Luke and silently retreated to the side. He needed to return to his country safely, and Luke was indeed his best shield at the moment. Luke immediately replaced Xia Jinyuan's position. He glanced coldly at Cobra, who had returned to the sofa. There were several times when Luke wanted to shoot Cobra directly with the gun in his hand. He had wanted to do this countless times in his heart, but in the end, reason prevailed and he resisted the impulse. Outside, the gunfire was particularly intense. The rioters arranged by Cobra saw their own people falling one by one and immediately understood that a group of people who were opposing them had also infiltrated the hotel. Cobra, who was sitting on the sofa, was on the phone with the city's chief executive. He was very angry about the government's inaction, and his voice was almost roaring. "Is this how you manage your city? You put me in danger. Do you know why I'm here? Sir, I came to the seaside because I wanted to invest in a very big tourism project, but in the end, something like this happened. Listen, sir, I want the government troops to come immediately and escort me to safety. Immediately, send someone over to protect me." After Cobra finished roaring, he didn't give the other party a chance to speak. A second ago, his face was full of anger, but he immediately cut off the call. The anger on his face disappeared like the tide, and in the blink of an eye, it was replaced with a cold expression. Chapter 41-38. Cobra said to the bodyguard with a gloomy voice, "Tell the people above to hurry up and invite the Chinese ambassador. I don't want the government forces to invite the Chinese ambassador first. If the Chinese ambassador doesn't cooperate, let people scare him. I think, no matter how calm the ambassador from a peaceful country is, he will temporarily be honest in the face of gunfire. Remember, our people are going to save the Chinese ambassador. If the Chinese ambassador doesn't believe us, we can let him see how our people kill the rioters and rescue him." "Yes, sir." The bodyguard in charge of these arrangements retreated to the side and relayed Cobra's order to the guy who was looking for Qin Xiu through the phone. Luke listened to Cobra's arrangement the whole time. When he heard that Cobra wanted his people to kill the rioters, the two people hiding in the dark couldn't help but smile slightly. The rioters were also Cobra's people, killing each other. Yes, this way there would be fewer targets for their comrades to eliminate. At this time, the city's government officials were already very busy. Their own officials were trapped in the hotel, the Chinese ambassador was also trapped in the hotel, and now Melbourne's most famous entrepreneur and philanthropist, Mr. Crone, was also trapped in the hotel. The incoming and outgoing calls made the atmosphere of the entire administrative building so low that it was as if there was a mountain pressing down on everyone, making it difficult for everyone to breathe. Xia Jinyuan heard Cobra's roar and instantly understood what this poisonous snake wanted to do. At this time, There was no safer way than to use the government forces to protect their retreat. Cobra could think of it, and Qin Xiu should be able to think of it as well. But it wasn't certain. He had 2 armed police from Zongnanhai beside him. With the way the Chinese military handled things, they wouldn't put their hopes on them. The government forces would definitely choose to save themselves before taking action. At this time, Xia Jinyuan didn't care if the signal flag special forces had fewer enemies. He only cared about Qin Xiu's current situation. There was a heavy knock on the door outside, and someone shouted the name of one of Cobra's bodyguards. Cobra's people killed a bloody path to cover everyone in the room as they retreated. 2 Russian signal flag special forces soldiers quickly dragged their shot comrade behind the fire door. Amidst the smoke, they contacted their comrades guarding outside and told them that their comrade here was injured. The people under Cobra were not a mob, especially the subordinates who were arranged to cover Cobra's evacuation of the hotel in the chaos. These people were professionally trained and were even more powerful than the government army. The special forces of the Russian signal flag had been intercepted by them just now. They hadn't been able to approach immediately and had temporarily lost their opportunity. Luke gently closed his eyes and once again played the role of a loyal subordinate to cover Cobra's retreat. The tracking signal device on his body reminded his signal flag comrades hiding in the dark where they were. In other words, as long as Luke and Cobra were together, signal flag would immediately know Cobra's location. Cobra left the room and began to retreat downstairs. Several smoke grenades were suddenly thrown out from one of the rooms. Xia Jinyuan shouted in English, "Get down!" and began to fight back. Bang 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 bang. His quick reaction allowed the guys who were covering Cobra's retreat to react. They concentrated their bullets and shot towards the front, forcing the special forces who wanted to rush out of the room to retreat. Chapter 4139. Retreat, there's an ambush. You guys cover Mr. Cobra, leave this to me and Luke. Xia Jinyuan, who was almost shot, growled coldly. Now, he and Luke were both loyal subordinates of Cobra, so they had to cover for him to leave safely. Cobra was covered by his bodyguards. When he heard Xia Jinyuan's growl, he rolled to the side and rolled to the side of the door frame of a room. His back was pressed tightly against the closed door, and his breathing was not chaotic. He coldly said to one of his bodyguards, "Let Xia come back, they'll cover." Xia was a very good subordinate, loyal and capable. He felt more at ease with him around. They were the ones covering Cobra's retreat. This time, it was Luke and another bodyguard's turn to break out of the encirclement. Xia Jinyuan became Cobra's bodyguard. At this time, Luke was very satisfied that he was the one who broke out of the encirclement. He took Cobra step by step toward the corridor where the Russian signal flag special forces were lying in ambush. The 2 signal flag special forces soldiers who were suppressed by the gunfire tightened their escape ropes around their waists and jumped out of the window. They stepped on the sill used by the hotel to plant flowers and plant. Then, the 2 of them nimbly jumped over several sills and finally chose the window sill of a room. Crash! There was the sound of glass shattering. The 2 broke the glass with their feet, and with 2 screams, they entered the room where the guests were staying. Hearing the gunshots outside, the 2 young women hiding by the bed saw 2 black shadows suddenly break out of the window. They were already frightened by the gunshots and hugged their knees, trembling, and screamed. The Russian Special Forces soldier who landed whispered, "Don't be afraid," and the 2 quickly ran to the door. One of the Special Forces soldiers' ear was pressed against the door, and after the hand signal of 1, 2, 3, he pulled the door open and fired in front of him. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. The NATO-made rifle bullets tore through the air and mercilessly hit the guys who covered Cobra's retreat, including one of his bodyguards. Shit! Luke cursed in a low voice. No one knew who he was cursing, but he finally fired this time. Cobra's face was so gloomy that it looked like water could drip from it. This group of people who came out of nowhere were quite strong. Moreover, they were clearly coming for him. Xia, leave this to them. You, cover me as I leave. Cobra's cold voice came from behind Xia Jinyuan. These bastards, their target is me. At this moment, Xia Jinyuan's back was pressed tightly against Cobra, using his body to protect the venomous snake. The bullets that didn't have eyes streaked past Firetail's eyes. He didn't know where Firetail was shot to, and his leather shoes were smashed several times by the ejected bullet shells. Hearing this, he said solemnly, Luke and I will cover them together. We'll definitely be fine. He would definitely not let anything happen to him. He still had to return to his country in one piece. Luke, who was in the middle of the battle, didn't hear what Xia Jinyuan said. When he saw several of the guys covering the retreat fall, Luke's eyes darkened. The front line of fire had been cut off. Luke knew that it was time for him to lead Cobra to retreat again. He took the venomous snake step by step and retreated into the trap that the Russians had already dug. Let's go, he said in a low voice and quickly changed to new magazine. The Russian signal flag special forces saw their target gradually approaching. They held their breaths as they hid, and now they were waiting for them to come down from upstairs. Chapter 4140. Rushing into the fire escape, the group quickly retreated to the first floor. These floors were controlled by Cobra's men, so the retreat was very smooth. However, they were ambushed again in the passage leading to the lobby, and in just a few seconds, 4 people fell. Luke roared, Xia, go to the back, go to the back! Quick! He yelled and pulled Xia Jinyuan very hard, pulling Xia Jinyuan, who was originally in front, behind him. Retreat to the back. Behind, the Special Forces soldiers with the signal flag are waiting. Xia Jinyuan, who was pulled to the back by Luke, understood why they had to retreat. He didn't break through the encirclement, but kept close to Cobra so that the poisonous snake wouldn't leave his sight. The Russian signal flag special forces behind the ambush saw that the target was getting closer and closer to them, and the grip on the rifle in their hands tightened. Soon, very soon, behind them was the hotel's back garden, and further back was the parking lot. The government forces had already surrounded the entire hotel and had begun to storm it. Cobra's bodyguard felt the phone in his pocket vibrate. He took out his phone and answered the call as he retreated with his gun. In just a few seconds, the bodyguard's expression changed drastically. He approached Cobra and said in a low voice, Boss, the Chinese ambassador is not in the room. He left the hotel. There was nothing worse than this news. If it weren't for the fact that a group of people had come to target him, this plan would have been perfect without any doubts. He only needed to wait for the Chinese ambassador to appear in front of him. Unfortunately, his plan had been foiled, and he, who only needed to wait, had become one of the fleeing passengers. Kill them all, don't leave a single one alive. His entire plan was ruined, and his good mood was ruined. Then, he could only let the guests of the hotel suffer his anger. The Chinese ambassador must be in the hotel. Since he doesn't cooperate with me, I'll let him know the consequences of offending me. Get rid of him. Not only did Cobra let the guests of the hotel suffer his anger, but he also wanted to kill Qin Xiu, who didn't cooperate with him. This was Cobra, a maniac who had no respect for other people's lives and only cared about whether his mood was good or bad. He was just a demon from hell wearing a human skin. Xia Jinyuan, who was right beside him, had a sharp glint in his dark eyes. A guy like him had no right to live. Death was his final destination. The Russians still want to capture him alive and pry out more secrets? What a fool's dream! With Cobra's power, as long as he didn't die, he would definitely be able to escape from the Russian side, and the signal flag special forces that were escorting him back to the Russian side would definitely be killed by him. Whose stupid idea was it to actually want to capture Cobra alive? Or could it be that there was actually a problem with the Russian higher-ups? Was it because there was no way to contact Cobra that he came up with this idea? And it was even adopted? If that was the case, Xia Jinyuan, who was not even surprised by the sound of bullets whizzing past his ears, was now in a cold sweat because of his own imagination. If there was really a problem with the Russian higher-ups, Cobra going to Russia was equivalent to a vacation. When the vacation ended, he would continue to return to Melbourne, and Luke's identity would be exposed. Cobra must not return to Russia alive. Go. The guys who covered Cobra's retreat quickened their pace. If they rushed out of the hotel from the first floor, there would be people outside to meet them. They could leave the hotel immediately without having to fight with the government forces. Chapter 41-41. As for the so-called rioters, they didn't even know who ordered them to do things. To them, a riot was a real riot. The entire hotel turned into a slaughterhouse. The people who started the riot were the cancer of the city. They hid during the day and acted at night. The more chaotic the city was, the happier they were. Human lives were no different from ants to them. Cobra, every time he took a step, he would think about the next 10 steps and the consequences of the next 10 steps. As Melbourne's most outstanding entrepreneur and philanthropist, how could he let his true face be exposed? He wouldn't. The rioters were real rioters. They were the rioters under Cobra, but they were definitely not the rioters under the entrepreneur and philanthropist, Mr. Crown. Now it was Cobra who ordered the massacre of all the guests in the hotel. It had nothing to do with the entrepreneur and philanthropist, Mr. Crown. Mr. Crown was also one of the victims. Xia Jinyuan had been watching Cobra for nearly a year and a half. Every time he was faced with his meticulous planning, he would be more vigilant. He would never allow himself to make a mistake as small as a hair. He was afraid that the slightest mistake would make this poisonous snake suspicious. If he were Luke, he would never take the initiative to tell Cobra where to retreat to. He would let Cobra decide how to retreat. Because once the signal flag special forces appeared, Cobra would realize that he was in an ambush. With his paranoia, he would immediately think that there was something wrong with Luke. Luke was the one who told him where to retreat to. Hopefully, Luke would be able to think of the key points and not let Cobra leave the hotel alive and fall into the hands of the signal flag special forces. Otherwise, Luke's undercover identity would be discovered by Cobra. Luke didn't want Cobra to live through the night. He was ready to make a move on Cobra at any time, but the time wasn't right yet. At present, Cobra had 3 top-notch bodyguards and 6 more who were covering the retreat. If he killed Cobra now, he wouldn't be able to return to China alive. Therefore, he wanted to use the guns in the hands of his comrades outside the signal flag to eliminate the people protecting Cobra before he made his move. Luke, who was walking with his back against the wall, glanced at Cobra, who was a short distance behind him. It was too dark, so he couldn't see Cobra at all, but he could feel her presence. With one hand, he pressed down on Xia Jinyuan, who still wanted to walk forward. In a very soft voice, he whispered into her ear, "Xia Jinyuan, you need to stay by my side at all times. Remember, don't rush to the front. I hope that after tonight, you and I will still be alive." Tonight was also the last time he and Xia would work together. After tonight, there would be no more Luke. Luke was not his real name. Xia Jinyuan was grateful for Luke's reminder. He knew that Luke didn't want anything to happen to him, so he reminded him again and again. He smiled and said indifferently, "You and I will be fine. Yeah man, we'll be fine. You stay close to me, you know? You'll be fine if you stay close to me." Luke also smiled. This time, he didn't whisper so that Cobra, who was behind him, could hear everything. Yes, they would be fine. Cobra firmly believed that he would be fine. They had already passed through the corridor leading to the back garden on the first floor. The hotel was completely without power, so all operations were carried out in the dark. It was dark in front of them and behind them. No one knew if there were hidden dangers in the dark. Everyone was tense, ready to shoot at the slightest movement. Chapter 41-42. Just like now, the guy in front suddenly heard a panicked breathing sound coming from the corner. Without any hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Bang bang. After several gunshots, the person in the corner was no longer breathing. No one deliberately looked at the person in the corner, not even Xia Jinyuan. It was not that he was cold-blooded, but sometimes it was impossible to be kind. You can't choose to be kind, you can only choose to be cold-blooded. He was angry about Cobra's plan to massacre the hotel guests. As a soldier, he also wanted to save the innocent guests, but could he really do it? No, he couldn't. He couldn't save people, he couldn't interfere. The only thing he could do was to kill the initiator of all the tragedies, so that he wouldn't have a second opportunity to harm the innocent people. A faint green light appeared in front of them. It was the exit sign, which was also the road sign used to escape in a fire. The guy in front quickened his pace. Xia Jinyuan stopped and said to Cobra behind him, "Let them see first." Luke, who was standing in front of him, frowned a little. It seemed that he had to find a way to get rid of Cobra after they got out. The very loyal Xia Kaiqing. He didn't want to go against Xia. The best way was to get rid of him. They stuck close to the fire door. Two of them were on alert with guns, while the other two slowly opened the heavy fire door. Boom! The explosion sounded without warning. The fire wave swallowed the two guys who opened the door before they could even make a sound, and they were killed on the spot. The heavy fire door was instantly blown away by the airwave like a thin piece of wood, smashing into the bodies of two other gun-wielding guards. Screams of agony rang out in the flames, echoing all the way to the front of the promenade. The explosion and the scream made the people in front stop. The two armed police officers covered Qin Xiu and immediately went back the way they came, and finally hid under the fire stairs. They climbed out of the curtain of the washroom in the main room and retreated to the second floor bit by bit. When they wanted to go to the first floor, they saw 5 people in the corner of the first floor, wearing the military uniform of the government army, and then mixed in with guns. It was not safe to look for the government army. Qin Xiu immediately decided to sneak in from the second floor, and then sneaked back to the first floor, planning to leave from the back garden to the parking lot. Unexpectedly, there was an explosion at the exit leading to the back garden. Qin Xiu and the others did not move again. Xia Jinyuan and Luke fired while covering Cobra and rushing into the back garden. The 3 bodyguards retreated to the parking lot. Fire! On the rockery in the back garden, the spotter told the sniper the situation in front. The sniper from the signal flag began to snipe the 3 bodyguards. According to the intel, Cobra's bodyguards were the first targets to be eliminated. The sniper, who would not waste bullets, took action. The first shot was accurate, and a bodyguard who was covering Cobra was shot in the head and died. "There's an ambush!" Luke growled. Xia Jinyuan, who reacted the fastest, immediately pulled Cobra over and hid it under a leisure iron flower chair in the back garden. "There's only one shot. We've encountered a sniper," he said coldly, and his eyes scanned the surroundings like a hawk. Cobra, who was hunched over, looked around gloomily. Then, he said to Xia Jinyuan, "Xia, did you find anything? I found that these people are all here for the boss." Xia Jinyuan answered truthfully, "The boss's whereabouts have been exposed." That's right, Cobra now thought so. Chapter 41-43. Who do you think it is? Cobra asked. Xia Jinyuan shook his head. "I don't know." "Look, he was the one who brought me here," Cobra sneered. At the same time, he pressed the gun in his hand against Xia Jinyuan's back. "Xia, you discussed this with Luke, didn't you?" The feeling of having a gun pressed against his back didn't feel much. Cobra was just testing him. If he really thought so, he wouldn't have asked. He would have shot him directly without giving him any chance to explain. But he asked, so he was just testing him. Xia Jinyuan didn't even turn his head. His gaze was like an arrow as he stared at every corner. He was now more dangerous than Cobra. The Signal Flag's special forces only wanted to capture Cobra alive, and they would get rid of the people around her. Boss, there are snipers outside and enemies stronger than us. The probability of us escaping is very small. What should we do? He wasn't afraid and spoke calmly as usual. Cobra narrowed his eyes like a poisonous snake. Then, he retracted his gun. I will ask everyone inside to come here. Leaving isn't difficult. He didn't doubt Xia. If it was him, he would have many opportunities to kill him. Xia had been guarding him alone several times when he went out. If he really wanted to kill him, he would have many opportunities. There was no need for him to go through so much trouble. Luke was very likely to be the culprit. But he couldn't think of a reason why Luke wanted to kill him. He had been by Luke's side for 6 years. If Luke wanted to kill him, he would have many opportunities as well. But his intuition told him that the biggest suspect was Luke, a subordinate who had been by his side for 6 years. Luke returned to the hotel. He probably went to find someone to break out of the encirclement. Xia Jinyuan said coldly, which made those who doubted Luke a moment ago. Cobra's breathing stopped slightly. Wasn't it Luke? If it wasn't Luke, then who could it be? Who leaked my whereabouts? Cobra asked eerily. Xia Jinyuan was silent for a while. We're not the only ones who know about this trip. Someone in the company knows about it. The people in the underground market also know that this trip is not a secret. Too many people know about it. Cobra's chest tightened, and she felt even more depressed. That's right, it was not a secret that he came out this time. There were too many people who knew about it. His intuition told him that there was something wrong with Luke because he was the one who suggested retreating to the back garden. In that situation, retreating to the back garden was the best choice. Then it wasn't Luke, but someone else. Cobra, who always had a keen sense of judgment, finally let go of her suspicions because of Xia Jinyuan's words. Xia Jinyuan didn't even defend Luke. Explanations are excuses, Cobra. If that was the case, then why should he explain himself? Xia Jinyuan, who was good at psychology, always touched Cobra when he talked to her. Speaking with Cobra's personality, this was called applying what you have learned. The reason why Luke let the rioters out was very simple. He didn't want these guys to kill innocent hotel guests. He was a soldier, so he could only do his best to save the innocent guests. Xia Jinyuan spoke for Luke because they were all soldiers and didn't want to see the guests die at the muzzle of a gun. If there was a chance to save them, they would do it. The rioters in the hotel quickly rushed down from various floors. At this time, they were already counterattacked by the government troops who broke in. Just as they blocked the corridor and couldn't rush out in time, the rioters who disguised themselves as government troops shot from behind. Chapter 41-44. The gunshots and screams in the corridor leading to the first floor of the hotel were like hell on earth. Bullets were shot at close range, and the smell of burnt meat was mixed in with the bloody smoke. It was nauseating. The Russian Signal Flag Special Forces thought that their intelligence agent had betrayed them. It was not until the signal tracker appeared in the back garden again and covered their target's retreat that they felt a little relieved. They all knew that the intelligence agent who had infiltrated the target had been in hiding for 6 years. 6 years was too long. Before the mission, the person in charge of the military had told them very vaguely that if they found that the intelligence agent could not return safely, then let him stay in Melbourne. The meaning of this was equivalent to, if the intelligence agent was found to be abnormal, kill him immediately. However, their captain firmly believed that his team members, their comrades, would not have any problems. He asked them not to act blindly no matter what happened. They had to confirm that there was really no abnormality before they could act. The sniper saw Luke appear again through the scope. He said, "Everything is normal," in Russian, and continued to look for their target. The rioters in the hotel were all in a frenzy. They only believed in Killing Poke, and Cobra was the source of Killing Poke. They did not know who Cobra was. Now they only knew that Cobra was in the back garden and needed them to cover their retreat. Luke, who had returned to the hotel, told the guy who commanded the riot. His voice was a little loud, and it made a few rioters who did not know that Cobra was in the hotel's back garden excited, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. The guy who commanded the riot said to Luke fiercely, "You'd *MN, brainless guy, do you know that you have exposed the identity of the boss? I really want to twist your head off and kick it into the sea to feed the fish." Luke did not care at all. If the communication was not blocked, he would not have risked returning to the hotel to inform this guy, who would die soon. In order to prevent the rioters in the hotel from being able to maintain contact with the outside world, the government forces had directly blocked the communication of the entire hotel. They blocked the communication of the entire hotel and blocked the guests from calling for help. It was equivalent to blocking the news. Luke had to return to the hotel to inform the guy who had been secretly directing the riot. The rioters who rushed into the back garden were shooting blindly with their rifles, regardless of whether there were men in front of them or not, with Cobra behind them. 2 more of Cobra's bodyguards were killed. Now there was only one left to protect Cobra as she left. Xia Jinyuan and Luke protected Cobra from both sides. The Special Forces soldiers with the signal flags would not shoot blindly. They would only fire at specific targets. As the bullets swept past, several people immediately fell. The signal flag Special Forces soldiers, who were all guarding the best shooting positions in the back garden, seemed to have completed a game of whack-a-mole. They shot 1 point at a time and eliminated the firepower that was protecting Cobra from leaving. Xia Jinyuan observed that the signal flag was used to eliminate the people around Cobra one by one at the triangular point. His dark eyes darkened slightly, and he knew that his chance had come. These small fishes and shrimps were left to the signal flag to eliminate, while he was responsible for eliminating the biggest fish. Captain Xia's thin lips finally revealed a familiar ruffian smile. As he listened to the dense gunshots that constantly flew past his ears, his slender and tall body instantly became abnormally agile. He pulled a guy who was roaring and used him as a cushion. He took a step back and retreated behind the huge rocks that were planted with tall cacti on both sides. Chapter 41-45. From his point of view, Cobra was within his shooting range. The guy he used as a cushion had fallen into the low cactus bushes. He was not completely dead yet. His whole body was twitching and he was spitting out blood. His throat was making muffled noises. He wanted to say something, but unfortunately, he would never be able to say it. Xia Jinyuan bent down and quickly picked up the rifle that had fallen into the cactus bushes. He hid behind the huge rock. He only had 1 chance to shoot and he needed to kill Cobra. There was no second chance. The Special Forces of the signal flag were not to be trifled with. They would not give him a second chance to shoot. Luke realized that his partner Xia was being forced by a firing point and could not follow him closely. There was only the shadow of a bullet in the dim night, but his partner was nowhere to be seen. He was a little anxious and shouted in the midst of the gunshots, "Xia, follow me, quick." He had already given up on his partner the last time in Myanmar. This time, he would not give up again. Cobra heard it and immediately turned around. He thought he would see his loyal subordinate, but he didn't expect a bullet to accurately pierce through his forehead, shatter his skull, and enter the back of his head with white and flowery blood. The sky seemed to have collapsed and the ground seemed to have turned. Cobra only had time to blink his eyes before he fell to the ground. There was no time for him to recall the beginning of his life. He did not even have time to breathe. He just fell to the ground and there was no possibility of rescue. The special forces of the signal flag saw their main target fall to the ground. This made them very shocked. How could the most impossible thing happen? Cobra was dead. Luke did not know if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Otherwise, why did he see the shadow behind the rock look so much like his partner Xia? Did Xia shoot Cobra dead? Was it possible? No. Impossible. Xia was too loyal to Cobra. Therefore, he was worried that he would be killed by the special forces of the signal flag. That was why he kept him close behind him. He was so loyal to Cobra. How could he kill Cobra? He must be seeing things. It must be. Cobra had fallen, and it was time for the signal flag special forces to retreat. They no longer worried about whether the bullets would hit Cobra, and began to kill a bloody path for their intelligence agents. This sudden and fierce battle lasted for an hour. Blood flowed like a river in the hotel, and so did the back garden of the hotel. Xia Jinyuan retreated to the hotel. It was time for him to escape. He took off his bulletproof vest and blended in with the passengers who were taken care of by the government forces. Like the frightened passengers, he hurriedly walked out of the hotel and lined up to board the bus under the command of the government forces. He had an Asian face, so no one would suspect him of being a rioter. But because he had an Asian face, Qin Xiu, who happened to pass by the crowd in a car, saw him at once. The car stopped and an armed policeman jumped out of the car. He took out his work ID and walked past the government troops to Xia Jinyuan. There was a small light in the car. Seeing the young soldier with blood on his face and hands, Qin Xiu pursed his lips, took out a pack of wet tissues from his pocket, and handed it to him. He had taken this pack of wet tissues from the front desk of the hotel just now. He had used 2 of them to wipe his hands. Thank you. Xia Jinyuan took the wet tissues, opened the packaging, and began to wipe his face and hands. How can I help? Qin Xiu asked. Xia Jinyuan, who was wiping his face, paused. A faint smile appeared on his clean, handsome face. 1 ticket back to China immediately. Thank you. Qin Xiu snorted softly. Damn it. He really did not stand on ceremony. Sure, he replied. Chapter 41-46. Qin Xiu was very efficient. Since Xia Jinyuan needed to return to China, he immediately arranged for Xia Jinyuan to book a ticket back to China as an embassy employee. Okay, the flight will depart at 9:11 a.m. from Melbourne's Sybel Airport. Yes, arrange it as soon as possible. I'm returning to Melbourne now. Qin Xiu, who was on the phone with the embassy, had elegant features and a gentle aura. His expression was as gentle as jade, which was probably the best interpretation of politeness and alienation. After ending the call, the gentleness in his elegant features dissipated. He looked coldly at Xia Jinyuan, who was still wiping his fingers with a wet tissue. He did not immediately speak. As Xia Jinyuan's slender fingers moved, his gaze fell on his fingers. He seemed to have thought of something and pursed his lips. These hands. He had held Yi Qian's hand and hugged Yi Qian openly. He could reach out and hold her hand as he pleased without worrying about rejection. Unlike him, he did not even have a glimmer of hope. Qin Xiu gently closed his eyes and cut off his gaze. When he opened them again, he looked out of the car window. The flight will depart at 9:11 a.m. tomorrow. I'm rushing back to Melbourne overnight. You can return to China now, Xia Jinyuan. You can return to China to look for Yi Qian. You can return to China to tell her that everything is over and that she can be at ease. You can also return to China to be by her side and share the burden with her. Xia Jinyuan, you are the man by her side. Take good care of her. Don't make her sad, don't make her cry, and don't. He clenched his fists on his knees so tightly that his wrists were straightened. Don't give him a chance. Don't let him take advantage of the situation. Beams of light swept across the street. Inside the speeding black car, There was a flickering light and a graceful figure. Xia Jinyuan wiped the dirty blood off his hands. He looked up and saw Qin Xiu's cold expression in the beam of light. Qin Xiu pursed his lips and looked at him. Yes, he was sulking. Perhaps he was scolding Xia Jinyuan for being shameless and insatiable. They were love rivals after all. Previously they could coexist peacefully with each other. Now that the crisis had been resolved, they naturally had to climb out of the same trench. Above the trenches was the Xia Jinyuan, while below the trenches was the Qin Xiu. One could return to China to find Yi Qian after achieving positive results, while the other would continue to fumble about in the trenches, unable to climb out for a while. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and did not comment. But the smile on his face betrayed what he was thinking. He was happy, very happy. She had too much foresight. She had sensed that the small provincial capital, the four-sided sky, would not be able to trap Yi Qian. She had sensed that the little fox she had watched grow up would definitely shine brightly in the future. She had sensed her intentions and confirmed them. She had immediately acted without any hesitation to avoid missing the opportunity. Brilliant, too brilliant! With such a strong and sophisticated love rival like Qin Xiu, if he had not pursued the little fox in advance, it would have been hard to say who would win between him and Qin Xiu. Qin Xiu was outstanding in all aspects: demeanor, sophistication, charisma, appearance, family background, academics, career. He had all the specific advantages that an outstanding man should have. Such a strong love rival really made him feel uneasy. Fortunately, there was a gentleman who was elegant on the inside. Qin Xiu did not take advantage of the situation. Even if he was panicking now, he knew to look at the big picture and immediately prepared a plane ticket for him to return to China. After putting away all the dirty wet paper, Xia Jinyuan smiled and said, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Qin Xiu turned his head and glanced over. His voice was very cold as he replied, "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for the country behind us." "I know, but I still want to thank you." Xia Jinyuan continued to answer elegantly. Qin Xiu did not say anything more. It was too tiring to say more. Chapter 41-47. The car drove into the blockade line, and the armed police driving took out his work permit and handed it to the police. After the police carefully checked it, they politely knocked on the back seat window with a flashlight that was too bright to open their eyes. "Hello, Mr. Ambassador, we need to check your car. Please cooperate with our work." "Thank you." Qin Xiu glanced at him and raised his hand to press down the window. His handsome side profile was revealed. He looked forward and said lightly, "2 staff members and me, a total of 3 people. Please check." There was only one armed police officer driving the car and one armed police officer sitting in the front passenger seat. Qin Xiu sat alone in the back. He looked a little cold and didn't seem to be in a good mood. The police who checked could feel that the Chinese ambassador was in a bad mood. It was understandable that he was in a bad mood when he encountered the rioters massacring hotel guests. Understanding was understanding, but the inspection work had to continue. But they couldn't ask everyone in the car to come out and cooperate with their inspection like the previous cars. The police officer said, "I'm sorry to disturb you." Only then did he let his colleagues continue to inspect the car. If he really asked the Chinese ambassador to get out of the car, he had a hunch that things would become very bad. Qin Xiu finally turned his head to look at the police officer. He nodded slightly, and the coldness on his face dissipated a little. The police officer who received his gaze couldn't help but feel relieved. He quickly returned an apologetic smile. The 2 police officers who were inspecting the car with flashlights didn't miss any corner. Even the trunk was opened to check carefully. After confirming that there was no abnormality, the police officer walked to the door again and saluted Qin Xiu. He waved the electric police baton in his hand to let the people in front pass. The car slowly drove away from the blockade line for at least 500 meters. After confirming that there were no police officers following, the car drove to a shadowed place on the street. The door of the back seat opened while driving, and Xia Jinyuan returned to the car from the bottom of the chassis. The door closed and the car drove to Melbourne overnight. The country had received the latest news that Cobrad had been successfully killed. Xia Jinyuan, a Special Forces soldier who had been lurking for nearly a year and a half, returned to China at 9:11 a.m. tomorrow morning in Melbourne time. There was no direct flight. They would first arrive at Wenhua Airport before flying back to the capital. The entire journey would take 14 hours. It was now 2 a.m. on the 3rd of May in Melbourne, and 16 p.m. on the 3rd of May in China. There were still 3 hours before Yi Qian and his team's 3 days and 2 nights of wilderness survival training ended. They needed to reach the finish line before 6 p.m. on the 3rd of May. Yi Qian, who was undergoing wilderness survival training, did not immediately receive news that Xia Jinyuan had returned to China. Luke, who had returned to the hotel, was looking for his partner. From the back garden to the hotel, then to every corner, from 3 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, he did not find his partner. No one was alive, no one was lying in a pool of blood, and no one was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. None of them. His best partner, his best friend, had disappeared into thin air, and he couldn't find him at all. Was he the one who shot Cobra? He just wanted to ask if he was the one who shot Cobra. He just wanted to know who he was. He just wanted to know if he already knew his identity and secretly cooperated with him. He just wanted to ask. There were too many things he wanted to ask. Luke, who had retreated to the car to reunite with his comrades in the Signal Flag Special Forces, was a little dazed. Chapter 41-48. He thought that he would be very excited after everything was over. Yes, he was very excited now, but there seemed to be a corner of his heart that was empty. The wind kept pouring in, making him feel a little cold and a little disappointed. He wanted to ask his partner and get to know each other better. Maybe he could confess his identity. From the moment his partner raised his gun to kill Cobra, they could actually have a chat. Unfortunately, Xia did not give them a chance to talk and disappeared just like that. In the car, the special forces from the Russian Signal Flag had already made contact with the country. They changed their equipment in the car and were checked like ordinary passengers before leaving the blockade. Outside the car, the bright sun shone on the city. It shone on the clear blue sky and the clear mirror-like sky above the city. Under the clean sky, everything was so peaceful, as if there was no riot in the early hours of the morning. Pedestrians came and went on the street. There was an endless stream of cars on the street. The pedestrians still had smiles on their faces as they walked leisurely on the street. They were not affected by the riot, or it could be said that they were used to it. The north was the most chaotic part of their country. There were always a few riots in a month, and the whole country's people were used to it. The south had the least riots because it was where Melbourne's image was. Although the occasional riot was scary, they believed that the army would take care of it properly. But they did not expect that Melbourne's most famous entrepreneur and philanthropist, Mr. Crown, would die in the riot. The people who heard the news raised flags in protest. They demanded that the government find all the rioters who killed Mr. Crown and ask the government to give an explanation to the philanthropist, Mr. Crown, and the people. Sitting in the car, Luke's gaze fell on the 2 girls who were holding up pictures of Cobra's donations. He suppressed the empty feeling in his heart and unconsciously curled his lips into a cold sneer. If they knew that the so-called philanthropist, Mr. Crown, was actually a demon, they would be very sad. They only saw the surface of Cobra and were deceived for so many years. Until now they had gotten rid of a huge cancer, but the people who did not know the truth still wanted an explanation for this cancer. It was very ironic. Fortunately, Cobra was dead. This was the happiest thing for him at the moment. He was so happy that he could temporarily fill the hole in his heart. Xia, a mysterious guy, Asian, tall, handsome, loved money, silent, cold. This was the Xia he knew. Then, what was the real Xia like? Luke exhaled a mouthful of foul air that was mixed with blood. He did not know what kind of person the real Xia was. She was too mysterious. He had probably never truly understood Summer. Not in the past, and definitely not in the future. Perhaps he and his partner, Summer, would never meet again. Cobra was hit by a stray bullet and died on the spot. All the bodyguards around him were killed. Signal Flag Intelligence Agent Luke completed his infiltration and returned to the country. When the Russians received the news from the front lines, they were both happy and regretful. Some people were so gloomy that they broke the pens in their hand. Dead. Cobra wasn't brought back to Russia alive. She was dead. Damn it. The information in his hands and the underground businesses in other countries needed to be taken over by someone else. The death of Cobra not only made the Russian senior official angry, but also the president of a Western country who had always supported Cobra. He was so angry that he smashed his folder. Chapter 41-49. It was 8 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne. Xia Jinyuan took the passport and plane ticket that the embassy had prepared for him. He held the suitcase that was also prepared for him by the embassy. He didn't know what was inside the suitcase. As he walked, he raised his hand and waved, indicating that Qin Xiu, who had sent him to the airport, could go back. Qin Xiu stared expressionlessly at Xia Jinyuan's back as he left. He did not leave immediately. He waited until the plane took off and did not receive any news from Xia Jinyuan before he left the airport. The documents that the embassy had prepared for Xia Jinyuan were all real. Except for his personal information, which was all fake, the documents and other documents were all real. It was 9 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne on May 3rd. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who had been away from China for nearly a year and a half, had successfully completed his mission and returned to China. The third-year commanding students of the National University of Science and Technology had completed 3 days and 2 nights of outdoor survival training. They took the train back to school at 10 o'clock in the evening on May 3rd. The night was very quiet. Even the rumbling of the train didn't wake up the students who had fallen asleep as soon as they boarded the train. They were too tired. After 3 days and 2 nights of wilderness survival training, they hadn't eaten well, drank well, or slept well. A few students even fell sick midway through the training. They dragged their sick bodies and gritted their teeth to finish the training. For the students, who had never undergone such training before, this was a training of their spirit and willpower. Now that they were on the train, everyone was relieved. They leaned against each other and slept very soundly. Yi Qian, who did not sleep, paid special attention to the 4 students who fell sick, including He Jing. It was strange. Su Wen was completely fine, but He Jing, who had always been in good physical condition, fell down. She had a high fever during the day and a low fever in the afternoon. At this moment, Yi Qian reached out to touch He Jing's forehead. She still had a low fever. Their class and the students from another class were in the same carriage. Each class sent 4 students to complete the night's sentry duty. Yi Qian was in charge of the sleepiest period from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning. She patrolled from one end of the carriage, while the male students from the other class patrolled from the other end. When they met in the middle, the two smiled and returned. The whole journey only took 5 hours. They boarded the train at 10 p.m. and arrived at the train station at 3 a.m. The bus arranged by the school to pick up the students was already at the bus stop on the left side of the train station. The provincial capital was exceptionally quiet at 3 o'clock in the morning. When the students walked out of the exit in an orderly manner, the people standing outside were stunned for a moment. A line of soldiers carrying large backpacks on their backs. The scene was rather impressive. The 14 students who were not in good health got on the same bus and were accompanied by a student from their class. 4 students in Yi Qian's class had fallen down. She accompanied He Jing, who had a low fever and started to cough. The other 3 male students accompanied the male students. Song Jiqiu was in charge of arranging the affairs in the class. She took the lead in leaving the train station on the bus with the patients and went straight to the hospital. He Jing had a low fever. When the results came out, it turned into lung fire. She was also a little confused from the fever. One moment she was shouting Yi Qian's name, and the next moment she was shouting Su Wen's name. As for her boyfriend's name, she had never once called him by his name. Yi Qian, who was accompanying He Jing, ran up and down. It was not until He Jing lay on the bed and had an 4 drip that she had time to lie down. It was not until 9 o'clock in the morning that He Jing became clear-headed. She no longer felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes, she saw Su Wen writing something with a pen beside her, while Yi Qian was sleeping in the bed next to hers. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.